5:30. I'd like to call this meeting of the Plan Commission to order. We have a quorum. Is anyone registered for public comment?
Nope, no one's not.
Are there any communications, disclosures, or recusals? Mr. Hagenow.
I will not be in attendance at our next meeting on the 24th.
Okay, thank you for letting us know. Anyone else?
Sorry, 28th.
Okay, thank you. Alder King.
I'm gonna recuse myself from voting on the Lakefront property thing on our consent agenda. 15,
Okay,
thank you.
anyone else? This is probably as good a point as any to point out that this will be Mr. Shepherd's last meeting with us. So thank you for your service, and we'll miss you. You can watch us on TV. Minutes of the July 20th special meeting. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Cantrell, seconded by Mr. Oath. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Passes unanimously. Minutes of the July 24th regular meeting. Is there, moved by Mr. Cantrell, seconded by Mr. Rui. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Passes unanimously. Minutes of the August 3rd special meeting. Moved by Mr. Cantrell, seconded by Mr. Rui. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Passes unanimously. Schedule of meetings, we have one more in August, and then, oh my God, we're in the middle of September, September 18th. Routine business. We have 5 items of routine business. I'll read them all, and then unless anyone wants to separate them out, we'll take one vote on all of them. Item 1, Legistar 4819. Well, I don't need to read them all out. No, we can, huh? For TV, read them all out? Okay, Legistar 48195, determining a public purpose and necessity and adopting a relocation order for land required for the construction and maintenance of a portion of the Demetral Park path, a new shared use bicycle and pedestrian path from East Johnson Street at Pennsylvania Avenue to connect to the existing path in Demetral Park. Item 2, Legistar 48206, authorizing the city to accept ownership of a Little Free Library from the Junction Ridge Neighborhood Association located in Junction Ridge Park at 8502 Elderberry Road. Item 3, Legistar 48215, authorizing the execution of an underground electric easement to MG&E across a portion of property owned by the City of Madison located at 435 Milky Way. Item 4, Legistar 48220, authorizing the execution of an underground electric easement to MG&E across a portion of the city's property located at 917 East Mifflin Street. And item 5, Legistar 48222, authorizing the execution of an underground electric easement to MG&E across a portion of Old Brook Park at 3527 Atwood Avenue. Is there a motion to approve routine business? Moved by Mr. Cantrell, seconded by Alder Zellers. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's approved. Got to say, execution and electric seems like an odd juxtaposition. New business, item 6, Legistar 47510, a substitute authorizing the development of a neighborhood plan for the Triangle and Monona Bay area and the creation of a neighborhood plan steering committee. Mr. Parks, are you going to address this? Mr. Furco?
Yes, just a quick introduction. This is an authorizing resolution to start work on the plan as outlined in the resolution. As noted in the preamble, this is going to include, along with some of the standard efforts that we put in our neighborhood plans, this is one that is taking a close look at the racial equity and social justice tool. And that's one that both the public participation plan and the steering committee, the selection of that committee has been gone through that tool to help select that. The process is anticipated to start fall this year, and probably about a year-long process with adoption of the plan, tentatively scheduled for next summer, next fall is the general plan. But as you can notice, the Triangle area north of West Washington Avenue, south of Regent Street, and the Monona Bay area, including the areas and the neighborhoods surrounding Brittingham Park, are the target areas. If there are any questions, I could certainly ask that, or answer that if you have any to ask.
Any questions? Then, motion to approve, moved by Mr. Rui, seconded by Mr. Cantrell. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. That passes unanimously. Secretary's report.
Okay.
Mr. Furco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wanted to note a few items. First, highlight the upcoming matters at your next meeting, a handful of large profile projects. We've got a mixed-use development on Junction Road. We've got the conversion of the former executive mansion on Gilman Street into a hotel. We've got a large neighborhood plat, a plat out on South Point Road, including up to 401 single-family lots and multifamily lots as noted in the agenda. Also wanted to note, and it's not listed on the upcoming matters list, the Darbo-Worthington Starkweather neighborhood plan is scheduled to be before this body at their next meeting. And also the discussion and consideration of two TID districts, that would be TID districts 46 and 47, are also scheduled to be here at your next meeting. Including then the September 18th meeting, which is our only meeting in September as far as regularly scheduled meetings. There's a mixed-use development at Winnebago Street and Gammon Road, along with other projects as noted on the upcoming matters list on the agenda for tonight. I also wanted to take this opportunity to introduce to you Sydney Prusak, who's sitting in the second row. She is our newest development review planner, will be a case manager, so you'll be working closely with her, and she'll be making presentations and preparing staff reports here look forward to that in upcoming meetings very shortly. So we're very thrilled that Sydney's here. Today is actually her first day. And so she's been with us about 8 hours now. So
Welcome.
That's all I have for the Secretary's report.
Okay. That clock is wildly off in the back, so it's about 20 to 6. We can't go to public hearings till 5:45, so we will be informal for about 5 minutes. I want to let people know who are sitting on the sides that you're more than welcome to sit in the last couple of rows. You can see better. It's totally up to you. And when we restart, please turn off your cell phones. Thank you. We'll be back in 5. We're back in session. It's 5:45. We can take up public hearings. Again, a reminder, please turn off your cell phones. For those of you who are not here regularly, I want to explain how we will conduct the meeting. We start with what we call our consent agenda, which we take up all the items that are unanimously agreed upon and no one insists on speaking. We dispose of them with one motion, and all of those folks get to go home and enjoy their evening while the rest of us stay here and thrash out the ones that are more contentious. So I will read those off. We'll start with a referral, item 7, Legistar 45036. creating new sections of the Madison General Ordinance, to approve an amended general development plan and specific implementation plan at 1004 to 1032 South Park Street. That will be at our August 28th meeting. The rest of these are by consent. Item 8, Legistar 47736, amending the ordinances to clarify that any change in a limited production and processing use requires a conditional use alteration. Item 11, Legistar 48026, creating and renumbering sections of the ordinances to require review of final building design by university area committees and to allow for an appeal from a decision of an architectural review committee. Item 13, Legistar 47852, conditional use to establish a brewery with tasting room at 931 East Main Street. And that is it for the consent agenda. We have a few registrants on consent. Item 13, Eric Jones, 1216 Spate Street, in support, available to answer questions, representing Giant Jones Brewing LLC. Erica Jones, 1216 Spate Street, in support, available to answer questions. And is this Jim or Jill?
Jill, I believe.
Jill Elke, 1501 Williamson Street, representing Commonwealth, in support but not wishing to speak. Those are the only registrants for items on the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Mr. Cantrell, seconded by Mr. Oath. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. They all pass unanimously. Those who were here can go home and brew, and the rest of us will continue on. I believe that will take us. We've had a request to take up item 15 out of order. Without objection, the next item on the agenda then will be item 15, Legistar 478854, demolition permit and conditional use to allow a single-family residence to be demolished and a new single-family residence to be constructed on a lakefront property at 5450 Lake Mendota Drive. Mr. Furco.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before you this evening, there is a request for a demolition permit and a conditional use to allow for the demolition of a single-family residence and to allow for the construction of a new single-family residence on a lakefront property. The new home has an estimated area of 3,760 square feet. This is on a lakefront lot, and this proposal is subject to the standards for demolition permits, conditional uses, and lakefront development. As far as staff understands it, there are some questions about the size of the development, and I'd like to direct the commission's attention to the staff report authored by Chris Wells, and on page 4 of that, and then in the paragraph that precedes it, there is staff's analysis of the size of this structure. As detailed in that information, among the 11 homes in the area, this is the third largest. The proposed home would be the third largest in the area. And then the second page talks about how that relates to the floor area ratio, which has, as proposed, an estimated floor area ratio of 0.29. And a comparison of that property along with the floor area ratio of surrounding homes is there. As noted in the staff report, the Planning Division does believe that the conditional use standards can be met. I believe the question that was raised by the Plan Commission the Plan Commissioner that wanted to have this off had to do with the conditional use standard 13 that says, when applying the conditional use standards to lakefront development under Madison General Ordinance Section 28.138, the Plan Commission shall consider the height and bulk of principal buildings on the 5 developed lots, or 300 feet on either side of the lot with the proposed development. So along with that standard, all the other conditional use standards would need to be found met if the Plan Commission were to approve this. So Plan Division believes the standards can be met, but can answer questions after the public hearing. Thank you.
Do we have registrants?
There are registrants. We have registrants in support available to answer questions.
Okay.
And maybe there's one wishing to speak. These two are this is the applicant and this is.
Okay. Well, we have three registrants, but only one wishing to speak. Kathy Cox, 25 Turnwood Circle, in support, wishing to speak.
I'm here.
Well, you have to come up here to speak. So you've got 3 minutes if you need an additional, yeah, please.
Okay. I actually own the property at 5454 Lake Mendota Drive, which is right next door to the property in question. I'm in total support of what he wants to build there. I have no objections to it. I believe the size of the property would fit nicely on the land. And actually, if you look at the properties, I believe it was 5 on either side. Most of those properties were built, mine was built in 1910 as a summer cottage. So they were very small properties to begin with. There's plenty of land space and space between the neighbors' yards that they could now build a bigger house in there to come up to our century standards here. And so again, I have no objection to him building that house. It fully supports the size of it. And I just wanted to convey that as a neighbor that would be directly impacted.
Thank you. Just wait and see if there are any questions. Are there any questions for Ms. Cox? Seeing none, thank you.
Thanks.
The next two are, well, one is the applicant, Andy Russell, 5450 Lake Mendota Drive, in support, available to answer questions. Are there questions for the applicant? No. And Christopher Gosh, 5540 Salter Court, in support, available to answer questions. Are there any questions for any of the registrants? Then I will close the public hearing. Questions of staff? Alder Zellers.
I really don't have any questions of staff. I just wanted to make a comment, so if other people have questions, I will.
Go for it.
Okay. I was the one who had this taken off of the consent agenda, and it's not because I object to the demolition, and I'm not even sure I object to the size of the building. What I really wanted to make sure that we're all tracking on is that we are migrating toward bigger and bigger buildings along the lakefront, and increased floor area ratio on the size of the lot. So if that's the direction that we are comfortable with, then I think that this is fine. It is, as Mr. Furco pointed out, the third largest, and the floor area ratio is the second largest in the properties on either side. So again, it is more just to make sure that we're kind of aware of what we're doing in terms of our lakefront properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Zellers. Anyone else? Then a motion would be in order. Mr. Cantrell,
I would move approval, finding this consistent with the standards.
thank you. Is there a second? Ms. Berger seconds. Any discussion? Then all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That passes unanimously. So that will bump us back to item
I'm sorry,
9.
8.
I believe, item
Yes.
9? Okay, item 9, Legistar 48006, creating new sections of the Madison General Ordinance to create site standards for surface parking in the downtown residential 1 and downtown residential 2 districts. Mr. Tucker.
Thank you. This amendment came forth as we had a project that was brought to our attention that had a unique situation. It was able to install both a front yard or an area, parking area between the building and the street of the front and between the building and the back lot line, negating what kind of open green space was sort of part of the development originally. It pointed to the fact that we don't have site standards for the residential downtown 1 and 2 districts. So this amendment establishes a parking placement site standard that would allow either one or the other, but not both, front yard and backyard. I'm not really sure how much effect there's going to be on this. We've done a brief study of the downtown 1 and 2 districts, and it doesn't appear there to be many lots that would benefit from this, because most of the lots that have land are fairly landlocked. They have very tight side yards, and they can't get driveways to the backyard. However, this standard is, would be a new standard and would be applicable to properties moving forward.
Thank you. I'll open the public hearing. Are there registrants? There are no registrants. I'll close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Seeing none, is there a motion? Mr. Cantrell?
I would move approval of this amendment.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mr. Oath, seconds. Discussion? I'm sorry, Ms. Berger?
I just was going to get on the discussion.
Well, we're on
Yes,
discussion.
okay, great. So, yeah, I just wanted to, I had brought it up when I first saw this come up. I was a little bit worried that some of these sites that are targeted happen to be sites that have some rare, more affordable units in the downtown area. And so I was concerned that maybe this could be doing harm to already existing conditions, but I was reassured by Matt Tucker and Alder Verveer's correspondence in our packets that it sounds like it's really a unique situation, and we're not going to be taking parking away from people who have it, and it's not going to create potentially the problems that I thought. So just wanted to bring that up. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Then all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It passes unanimously. Item 10, Legistar 48025, creating section 28.185 paren 6 paren A3 of the Madison General Ordinances to exempt from the demolition permit process buildings identified for demolition in an approved campus master plan in a campus institutional district. Mr. Tucker.
Not me. I'm leaving.
Mr. Parks.
No, frankly, you're not. You were not excused. Doesn't work on my kid either. Just really briefly, item number 10 was one of 2 text amendments that we promised the Common Council when we adopted the University of Wisconsin's campus master plan back in July to clean up the zoning code as it relates to a 10-year master plan document that called for demolitions, which the Plan Commission recommended to the Common Council, and the Common Council approved on July 18th. And so what this amendment does is to clarify that any demolition properly identified in the approved campus master plan, which has an effective date of 10 years, that demolition does not need to come back to the Plan Commission for approval of a demolition per 28.185. And so staff is supportive of this amendment, both amendments, frankly. The one's already been approved, this one as well. And we're also fine with the substitute that I believe Alder Zellers wishes to offer, which copies were provided at your place, which clarifies that the demolitions that are approved in the master plan are only approved for 10 years with the life of the master plan. So little reassurance in that regard. So thank you.
Thank you. Then I will open the public hearing. Are there registrants?
There are no registrants.
There are no registrants. Mr. Hagenow, do you have your, okay. There are no registrants. Are there questions of staff? Then a motion would be in order. Alder Zellers?
I move, well, I move
Substi-
approval, but then I would like to also move the substitute.
Why don't you just do it all at once? Just
Okay.
move the substitute.
Okay,
We
I
all
move the
have it.
substitute, and if I get a second, then I'll, okay.
Seconded by Mr. Rui. Go ahead.
Okay, and Alder Verveer and Bid Arceloff were the original sponsors of this, as I recall, and Alder Verveer has indicated that he supports this, the substitute. And my concern was just to make sure that it was clear that it is only for the 10 years and not beyond that. And I'll tell you the reason why I was a bit concerned about that. I've heard a number of people who I do have a great deal of respect for note the Moss Humanities Building as having a great deal of architectural merit. And I want to make sure that we have a community conversation before or if that is going to be approved for demolition. I also recognize that there are those that absolutely detest the building and think that it's unsalvageable to be used for anything. But it certainly is, if you look at the exterior, has a very striking architecture that is vastly different than anything that we're putting up today. And I would kind of liken it to the Red Gym, which was on the brink of being demolished in its day. So I just want to make sure that we have a good conversation about that particular building. It is beyond the 10-year horizon in the plan where they talk about demolition. So with this, I think this amendment reassures me that we will still have an opportunity for a conversation about that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any further discussion? And we have a motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. That brings us to item 12, Legistar 47756, a conditional use to construct a 4-story addition to a 2-story commercial building at 668 State Street. And I think I'm confident in saying this staff report will be Mr. Parks.
Is true. Briefly, for the Plan Commission, 668 State Street is before you because a 4-story addition is proposed to the existing 2-story commercial building that sits on the site. The applicant is proposing to effectively take that 2-story building that also includes some space, some finished commercial space in its basement, and convert it into a mixed-use building as the zoning code would look at it by the addition of 4 stories and 24 dwelling units on floors 3 through 6. It requires conditional use approval because of the scale and scope of the addition. Any addition of that size, 4 stories and/or greater than 20,000 gross square feet, requires Plan Commission approval following a recommendation from the Urban Design Commission regarding the project's conformity with the downtown urban design standards and the downtown urban design guidelines. Staff has reviewed the proposal and in general believes that the conditional use standards can be met. The project is generally consistent with the downtown plan recommendations for the downtown core mixed use, which applies to most of the Capitol Square and State Street area. It's certainly consistent with the character of the development that surrounds it along State Street, and we do not feel that approval of the project will have an adverse impact on the normal and orderly development of surrounding properties or the uses, values, and enjoyment of surrounding properties. The Urban Design Commission did review the project on August 2nd. You have before you a report with their recommendations. They did give the project final approval with a couple of modifications, and I would be happy to answer any questions after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. I'll open the public hearing. The first registrant is Randy Bruce, 7601 University Avenue, in support, wishing to speak, representing the applicant.
Can we have Kevin Burrow be the first register?
Okay, the first speaker will be Kevin Burrow, 7601 University Avenue, Middleton, in support, wishing to speak. Mr. Burrow? Why everybody doesn't use Macs. So much easier.
You know how to get to the flash drive on here?
Having the foggiest.
What are you trying to?
He's trying to get to the
flash
flash
drive.
drive.
Oh.
Perhaps it's still installed.
Let's just try that. Oh.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. My name is Kevin Burrow with Canothie and Bruce Architects, representing the developer, 668 State Street LLC. What we're doing here is completing.
Excuse me a second.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to turn off their cell phone at, maybe you just need to turn it off. Okay, go ahead. Sorry for the interruption.
That's okay. This project was originally master planned back in 2006, when the existing structure was completely demolished except for the front facade and renovated into currently a two-story building with the intention of adding 4 more stories of housing when the market demand became prevalent, which has become the case right now. So as you see on the plan in front of you, what we're proposing is 4-story addition, which is shown in the blue color, which is at the western end of the 600 block of State Street right before you get to Library Mall. The current use of the building is UW Credit Union on first floor, Bowser's Books on second floor, and a vacant space of commercial in about 2,000 square feet in the basement area. So this is a closer up site plan. Our building is shown in the middle there. South of us, or I'm sorry, to the west of us is Paul's Books, and then Walgreens is on the corner. The front facade has been designed based on feedback from UDC, where we are renovating the look of the facade while trying to maintain as much of the existing fenestration as possible on floors 1 and 2, to then create this cohesive element of a 4-story building with all brick fronting on State Street, and then the upper 2 stories, 5th and 6th floor, are required to step back 30 feet per zoning, and that's been accomplished, and then we're cladding that with a metal panel siding of 2 different tones. We actually received a variance from the city with regards to, there's an existing elevator shaft that currently resides up there, which has the face of the shaft at 29 feet off the front of the building, so that's been approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals. But otherwise, our intention is to comply with zoning completely. So what you see is the front facade, and then on the right-hand part of the screen is the step-back area showing where the rest of the 2 stories of the apartments continue beyond. The rear of the building has the same masonry element existing on the back, which we're extending with a small addition. And then above that is the metal panel siding with the residential units shown there with the balconies. Here's a perspective view looking down State Street towards the Capitol. The darkest element in the middle shows the massing of our proposed addition, where you see the 4 stories sitting right on State Street, and you do not see the step-back area from this perspective with regards to floors 5 and 6. This is a view looking from the east towards the west, just past our building, where you can see the new masonry facade on this building and the step-back area of the 5th and 6th floors. That on top of the step-back area is a common use patio.
Can you summarize in about a minute?
Yes, I can. So we've got the floor plans here showing the basement level where there's commercial space existing and then some residential space. And we're providing 12 indoor bike stalls on this lowest level. Moving up to first floor, again, UW Credit Union occupies most of the floor. There's a small addition off the back which will house the trash receptacles, compactors, and then another 12 additional bike stalls available off the back. And then typical 3rd and 4th floor represents apartment units. 5th and 6th is this plan where you can now see that patio area on the front of the building. And then this is 2nd floor showing the existing Balzer's books.
Questions for Mr. Burrow? Yes, we have questions. Alder Zellers.
I think I heard you say that you had, or the applicant owner, had retained the facade only when it was redone 10 years ago?
Correct.
And now what is happening to that facade?
It is getting reworked with new masonry, and the windows are being modified above the, on the 2nd floor level.
So is there going to be anything left of what that facade was that you saved?
In essence, no, other than the windows on the 1st floor are going to be left intact to minimize demolition and impact on the UW Credit Union space. This was not a historic structure. There was no requirement to save the facade. It was just a personal wish at that time.
Uh-huh. And tell me again, so what's the masonry going to be? It's going to be regular size
Yes.
brick, not utility brick? And
Correct. A modular size brick, and it's a buff color. I have a sample here if you'd like to see it.
okay. No, that's okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Rui.
Thank you. Where is the typical renter going to be entering the building?
They'll be entering off of State Street.
Okay, that leads to my next question. Why is the bike parking in back if they're going to be entering off of State Street?
The only available access, because of the existing construction and the existing tenant spaces, provides for the bike parking to be constructed in the new addition off the back. Currently, there's no space within the building for bike parking.
But at the same time, the tenants won't be entering the building off the back, they'll be entering it off the front.
They have the option of entering directly off the back, where there's a direct door into the bike parking area off the back.
Where's the elevator in this scheme?
It's existing up 30 feet back from the front wall of the building.
Have you investigated, does that have bike access on the elevator to bring the bikes up to their apartments?
Yes, you in essence could fit your bike in the elevator and take it up to your apartment, or you could take it in the elevator and go down to the basement level and then connect to the bike
From the
parking
front?
area. Yes.
Okay, the other bike parking, outside parking in back, is that secure? Or is that exposed to anybody having to walk by?
It's exposed. There's 2 bike stalls adjacent to the indoor bike parking.
Oh, I thought some of it was outdoor.
Yeah, those 2 stalls just north of that door are exterior bike parking.
So anybody could walk back there anytime in the low visibility area and do whatever they wanted to with the bikes.
For those 2 stalls, yes, it's public access. It's a public alley shared by all the adjacent.
You might consider making those more visible or more secure,
Okay.
because I wouldn't park my bike there.
Are you done, Mr. Rui?
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Cantrell?
I have a question about urban design's
Yes.
recommendation. I read their notes of their meeting and then their action, and there was a couple different options on the State Street facade.
Yes.
And in reading at least the notes of the discussion, it seemed like there were a majority, there were only 4 members there, at least voting members, besides the chair. It seems like a majority of those members preferred the other option, but it implies that the action was that, as you show it, an all-brick option. What's,
Actually, I don't recall the exact wording of the minutes, but the majority at the meeting were in favor of the all-masonry option. There's only one member that preferred the metal panel just to modernize the building.
okay, so the all-brick option was
Yes.
the preferred?
Yes.
Okay. The other I guess, question I had, staff in its correspondence to the Urban Design Committee suggested that they look at the west elevation, since the west elevation doesn't have any openings, and there's a large portion of that's a metal, use of metal. It doesn't appear that the Urban Design Committee addressed that. Did your firm look at any other options on the west elevation to kind of at least make that a little bit more attractive?
We had discussed it with Urban Design at the meeting, and given the proximity to the adjacent building, which is a taller building than ours, it was felt that there would not be a sufficient view of that facade at all.
And you couldn't put any additional windows in that facade?
It's a fire-rated wall, so any windows would be false if they were to be installed there.
I see, okay. Did you look at use of any additional, different materials on that facade, rather than the, kind of the corrugated metal option? I think that's the material that staff was probably most concerned with.
We've discussed it with the client, but we haven't looked at it in great detail.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Oath is next.
Yes, thank you. Just a clarification. I think you said that the existing two-story building, when it was built to accommodate the additional 4 stories?
That is correct.
Okay. At the time it was built, was that approved by the Planning Commission as a 6-story building, or is this the first time that's being brought forth?
It's my understanding this is the first time that the full 6-story is being asked for permission to be constructed.
Okay, that's...
Alder Carter.
Yeah, a couple things. When you look at the rear north elevation and I think it's on the same slide of no, it's not, okay. There is this blank wall, the dark brown. Do you see it at the rear north? Is there any way that can be engaged better? And also, is there any, at least I didn't get a chance to read the UDC minutes, but can the windows be a little bit larger? And then also, is their commercial gonna stay on the first floor or not?
Yes, all the commercial that's currently existing in the building intends to stay.
Okay.
The windows sizing has been maximized based on the fire separation distance to the property
Okay, yeah.
line.
And what size is that?
We're limited to a certain percentage of the window openings. You're asking what size the exact windows are? Or I would approximate the existing windows at about 30 inches by 6 feet tall. And some are paired up, so the single ones would be 30 by 6 and then 5 foot by 6.
Okay. And the entrance from, is there, is the elevator big enough to accommodate a bike? I didn't hear you answer that
Yes,
question.
it is. The elevator has to be sized sufficiently for a gurney, for fire or emergency EMT access, so certainly a bike would fit within that space.
Okay, and I didn't see if you had any common areas other than the lobby?
In the basement, there'll be a common exercise room and a laundry room. And then there's the outdoor patio on the 5th floor.
Anyone else for Mr. Burrow? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The next registrant is Randy Bruce, 7601 University Avenue. Oh, I'm sorry, you're not next, Mr. Bruce. Sorry, the next registrant is Carol Askins, Paul's Bookstore, 670 State Street, opposed, wishing to speak. Usually, I get them in the order to be called on. Okay,
Joanne?
go ahead. You've got 3 minutes and an additional one.
My
if you
name
need
is
it.
Carol Askins, and I'm, I'm the owner of Paul's Bookstore, which is immediately next door to the proposed development. I thank Harold for providing me with plans of the project to review. That said, I am opposed to the project as it now stands. I have 3 primary concerns about the project. The first is the proposed 5th floor terrace balcony. It overlooks State Street, and I think this will be a safety hazard for both people on the balcony and people on the street. How many people will be allowed on this balcony by code? I can imagine how many people will crowd the balcony on a, football Saturday or a Halloween night, potentially throwing things on people below. Who will monitor the occupancy limits on that balcony? The police cannot be everywhere, and I worry about people throwing items from the balcony on people below. Also, I want to be sure the guardrail is safe. My second, concern is over the safety of my building. Over the years, tenants in buildings around my store have thrown garbage on the roof. I have had to pay someone to remove the garbage, which is bad enough. I'm worried about more serious damage, such as burning material from the planned grill or something heavy enough to damage my roof. The third is garbage and trash control on the terrace balcony. The development must include a good plan for trash disposal. Thank you.
Other questions from Ms. Askins?
And what happened?
Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Askins.
Thank you very much.
Okay, for the third and lucky time, I think, the next registrant is Randy Bruce, 7601 University Avenue.
Thank you very much. I wanted to address just a couple of things that have come up in discussion here. As it relates to that west elevation, which is shown here, is against the party wall or the lot line. But we did quite a bit of study of the visibility of that wall. Unfortunately, I don't have the 3D models that would illustrate that. That is what we did discuss at the Urban Design Commission, though. And I want to show you just a photograph. Okay, so looking here, the photo on the right This is our building right here, and then Paul's bookstore right next door to it here. And you can see what's kind of visible on that west facade. You know, to really get a view of that west facade, you almost have to be directly across the street, and there's quite a bit of you know, there's trees and other things in front of your view. So not only would you have to get across the street, but you'd have to really be looking for it to try to get a view of that facade. If that is still an item of concern, we'd certainly be willing to go back and more carefully address that or discuss that with the Urban Design Commission. But they did view it, and we did discuss it. In terms of the rooftop terrace, we had proposed a rooftop terrace that really maximized the amount of available space that was on that terrace. But I think that the previous presenter really brought up some good points, and we've since thought about that a little bit more. First of all, I just want to make sure everybody understood that this space would be monitored, both with a key fob access here so that you know who's going in and out, as well as security cameras out on the terrace. But right now, we're suggesting that instead of having this stretch the entire width across this, that we back that off. You know, perhaps we back that off 5 or 10 feet on either side, and I think we'd still have a very usable roof terrace up at the top. We could do the same thing towards the State Street side. I don't feel quite as concerned about the State Street side with that terrace as I do about either side, only because you're going to be quite visible from State Street. So I'd leave that.
Do you need an additional minute?
Yeah, I'll take one more minute. Thank you. Again, this space could be managed by key fob access. The owners, who are experienced developers in student housing, can restrict access to certain times and certain days. They're also willing to put cameras on the side of the building to monitor what's happening onto the neighbor's roof. So the neighbor right now is having, even now is having debris thrown onto her roof, and that could be monitored as well. So, any questions?
Questions from Mr. Bruce? Mr. Shepherd?
Hi, just in terms of the balcony, above it will be the, a balcony above that.
Yes.
Is that, a question was brought up about that particular?
There's one balcony that sits right above this one. It's just for one unit, and it just sits in this area here, essentially. So it really won't have access to either. I don't think it'll have access to State Street or either side without quite some effort.
Well, I'm thinking in a very sort of I don't know, troublesome way, but yeah. Will that be any issues of someone like standing up there throwing things down? I'm just curious.
Again, that space will be monitored. I'm not sure that we can stop someone from doing that the first time. You know, if someone does something like that the first time, I'm not sure we can stop that, but I think management can stop that from happening again and can evict non-compliant residents.
Okay, thank you.
Alder Zellers?
Yeah, when you say monitoring, what do you mean by that?
By security cameras.
Right, so you're saying somebody will be watching that?
No.
Or what do you mean?
So typically what's happening in a lot of the newer buildings, particularly with student housing, the common areas have cameras that are recording activities, so that if an activity is reported, a problem's reported, that they can go back and look and see, okay, what has happened,
And this can be done and with, you know, the tenants that caused the problem or their friends that caused the problem, and they can show what's happened, show the proof of the incident, and take appropriate action.
So it would require a complaint to management then?
It would.
Is that what you're saying?
It would require a complaint or some visible notice of a problem, right?
And you're talking about having a buffer between the legally accessible balcony and the edge of the building? Is that what you're saying?
Correct, yes.
Having had too many unfortunate situations with these kinds of buildings, how are you going to stop people from just getting onto the part of the roof they aren't supposed to be on? Are you going to have any kind of reasonable physical barrier, or is it just going to be you're telling them don't?
Well, what I would suggest is that we'd have a railing, you know, typical railing height that would restrict access from the sides and would extend out towards State Street. Now, that railing could be, someone could climb over the railing. That's a possibility, or someone could help someone climb over the railing. But again, we'd have evidence of that and could take appropriate action. I think these are the things, that type of thing could happen, but it is something that over time would not happen. It would be well known that the tenants aren't going to get away with it.
And so who is this building going to be targeted to? Students or anybody?
The majority of the majority of the apartments are studio apartments, or kind of what we call micro one bedrooms almost. They're under 500 square feet. They could be for students, but we also think that they are potentially for young professionals that they're, you know, first job out of school, or, you know, still wanting have access to State Street. So it's not necessarily students. In fact, the developers would prefer that the population wasn't all students.
So because, again, of some unfortunate experiences, students tend to move and change and go to different places. So some of them get trained, so to speak, and then you've got a new batch. Are you going to be, is there going to be some kind of management plan, communications that are going to let people know about what the ramifications might be, and how is that going to go?
Yeah, I think I'm glad you brought that up, because I didn't mention that. There will have to be, the rules of the building will have to be part of the lease and part of the application process, and that can be discussed with prospective tenants or tenants as they move in, so that education can happen during that process. That is something that we could prepare, a management plan, be prepared and reviewed by staff and as part of this approval, you know, the conditional use approval.
I think that's important to have that.
Are you done, Alder Zillers?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Mr. Rui again.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the bike parking. We just completed city just completed a bicycle moped parking study of downtown. I have concerns about what you're proposing here. We're already short of parking on State Street, and the way you're proposing this, it looks like most of your renters will be using parking racks on State Street and not what you are providing. And I'd rather see the ones on State Street put to better use for commercial. I'm looking at, let me get the right sheet here now. I'm looking at the first floor plan, A-1.1, and you've got 12 bike parking stalls that are secured with a door.
Correct.
How are you going to get to those, even to get to the door?
There is, okay, so there is access across this, from Langdon Street. There's vehicular access and pedestrian access now that serves this building. It serves some adjacent buildings as well. There's a joint access agreement here. So they could come across that access way and come in the door at this location.
And once they park their bike, how do they get into the building?
They are able they're able to go back out this door and into the building here. They can go downstairs to the basement, and there's a connecting hallway that would take them to the elevator.
I didn't know, does an elevator have a backside entrance to it, or?
Let me get to that floor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of gyration to get to those parking stalls. I'm willing to bet they'll never be used, ever.
Yeah. They're there for the tenants, because we're essentially lot line to lot line on State Street, and the building has no space on State Street. Really, there's the ability to place bike parking on State Street's very, very limited. I'm not sure how that would happen. So it really dictates a response towards the back.
But you're putting in 12 stalls that are, if you're lucky, 1% will be used. That's how bad it is, the location you've picked. So I'm a little concerned. You're doing lip service to the ordinance, but you're really not meeting the intent. The other one is parking in the basement. How are you going to get to the bike parking in the basement?
Again, that would be from the elevator on the first floor, would come down the hallway and into the bike parking area.
Yeah, that sounds much better. Have you considered, because you've got 12 stalls that not going to be used realistically, anything but bikes. Have you considered putting, say, one wall rack in each of the apartments?
Well, that could certainly be done.
I mean,
That certainly could be done, and we can, we know that some students will take their bikes upstairs no matter what, so.
well, that's part of what I'm seeing here. They're going to take them upstairs. They might as well give them a place to hang them. Would you be adverse if we made that a requirement?
No.
One wall rack in each apartment?
No,
Okay,
that's.
thank you.
That's, okay. I just did want to bring up that students now, I see students come in and out of this access way, pedestrians do that. So we didn't feel that was as restrictive as what you're concerned with.
Part of my goal is to minimize residential parking of bikes on State Street so it can be used for commercial bike parking, so that the commercial establishments can take advantage of the bikes. And I feel that the residential should take care of their own.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. Mr. Cantrell?
Would you object to, if we did approve this, to like a buffer, as you suggested on the east and west sides of the rooftop terrace, of whatever dimension you feel is appropriate, 4 feet, 5 feet, whatever that is?
I think that's a reasonable approach. Certainly, honestly, we didn't think about people launching things off the building to the either side, so I think that's a reasonable approach.
Okay. And do you have any dimension in mind, or
I would say
leave
it's
it open?
probably a minimum of 5 feet.
Okay. In addition, I brought up the west side and staff's concern about the lack of openings and especially the metal use on that side. And you said that you would be willing to look at that. What treatments or techniques would you suggest on that?
Well, there's the possibility of additional, not window fenestration, but material fenestration on that side that can be used to modulate that wall. Right now in our renderings, it looks, you know, it looks dark and blank and a little oppressive. We don't think it's, like I said, we don't think it's going to be visible, but certainly we can start to use some different material treatments along that to help modulate that wall.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Berger?
Nice segue for my question. So I was wondering about the west facade as well, and one of my key questions was I didn't look closely enough. The building on the corner, that's Walgreens is on the first
Yes.
floor, and there's apartments above. Are there window openings on the, you know, whatever side it is, I guess, that's
Yes.
facing that building?
Yes, there are windows on this side that would face that building.
There are windows. Okay, I thought maybe there weren't. Okay, yeah. So then I would especially agree. You know, it's just it's not great to look at from below, but especially the poor people that are going to be a handful of feet away from it. Thanks.
Anyone else? Mr. Bruce, I want to go back to the unmonitored security cameras. How long are the recordings kept?
You know, I can't answer that. If there's a time period that you're suggesting, I think that we could work that into the management plan, or I could find out and make that part of the management plan, have staff help us.
I think we could leave it to staff, but you certainly wouldn't want them to be recorded over every day, for example.
Yeah, understood, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Oh, we've got some new, Mr. Cantrell.
If we did refer that west elevation back to the Urban Design Committee to at least look at that, that would likely delay your project some. Is that a great deal of concern?
I think can we make that a condition of approval so that we know that we can move forward with the rest of the documents? Then I think it would be appropriate. That would be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hagenow?
I was just going to comment on the security cameras. Having the position that I am in, I have a lot of experience with these things at various apartment complexes, and I think we have found 2 to 3 weeks to be pretty reasonable. It gives, if there is an issue, it gives somebody time to report it. And if they're kind of hemming and hawing about it or thinking about whether they want to report it or something like that, usually within a week or so, they're reporting that. So, and that seems pretty standard, at least what we're looking for at ours. So.
Thank you. Anyone else for Mr. Bruce? And thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The next registrant is Cheryl Wiesenthal, 3500 University Avenue, neither supporting nor opposing, but wishing to speak. Welcome.
Hello. Yes, I'm Cheryl Wiesenthal. I'm the facility manager for UW Credit Union. And for those that don't know, we actually are a condo owner in this building. So we did have an agreed upon purchase agreement with Harold back in May of 2011 that was recorded. There's a declaration of condominium of 662 State Street condominium that does speak to different elements that have to be maintained within this development. We were going into it with full knowledge that there was going to be additional 4 floors on it. The one thing, just wanted to call to everyone's attention to make sure that it is met. We have, as part of the signed and recorded document, Exhibit D, that clearly calls out our signage limitation as defined on this diagram that was part of the recorded document. You see in the facade our sign, and that becomes a very important billboard for us, and we do want to keep and maintain that. Our concerns may be that the elevation then kind of reduces that agreed upon and approved square footage for signage. And so just want to go on the record that that does stay maintained in the design. Okay?
Questions for Ms. Weisensell? Thank you.
Thank you.
The last registrant is Harold Langhammer, in support, available to answer questions. Questions for Mr. Langhammer? Questions for any of the registrants? Well, if none of you do, I do. Probably Mr. Bruce, could you address Ms. Weisensell's concerns?
Yes, I can. So, on the front elevation, right now, we've got an area where we show signage on a metal background at this location. It is smaller than what is on that document. That was a document that I had not noticed before. She has brought it to our attention. I think the solution would be to bring the masonry down to the top of the door alcove here. We do the same thing on this side. So I think it's something that we can work with. And if we're going back to Urban Design Commission to talk about the west elevation, we can address it at that time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for any of the registrants before I close the public hearing? Then I will close the public hearing. Questions of staff? Ms. Berger?
I was just wanting to ask a general question about balconies on State Street. I'm trying to remember how we've handled them, and before I was looking at some of the pictures of the hub, and there are balconies that front State Street, but not a ton of them, and I was wondering what the city's take was on the, especially the larger balcony that reaches right up potentially to the edge. I like the idea of squeezing it on the sides, but, have we talked about that in the past, about balconies on State Street?
Well, I'll check with Mr. Parks as well. I mean, I know on other developments, I'm not necessarily on State Street, but we've had buffers and setbacks approved where the patio didn't go all the way to the edge, and I can't think of a specific dimension, but I know projects have been approved with a, let's say, 5 to 10 foot buffer. Again, I don't know specifically the State Street projects. I don't know if Tim has any more examples on State Street, or any more specific examples.
Nothing regulatory. I think they're primarily subjective as part of project approvals. Recollection, and I need to pull it up to confirm, but the downtown core zoning district does require usable open space for dwelling units, and that would most commonly be provided in balconies and in shared open spaces. And I think it would be fair to say that the zoning code encourages that. I believe downtown core is one of the districts where you can have 100% of the usable open space structured. So on a balcony, patio, shared amenity. So with that in mind, I would say that we're very open to it. I think that some of the behaviors that folks are speaking to tonight, they do exist. I think they are to a degree historical. From the standpoint of how certain rooftop patios at bars, some dwelling units, and whatnot were operated, certainly in the age before closed-circuit TV and very robust video monitoring. I've seen a couple of the systems. Mr. Hagenow, I'm sure, is very familiar with them. They actually can capture a lot of different angles. You can see faces very clearly morning, noon, and night. And you can actually save files for a lengthy period of time without requiring like a huge hard drive of memory in order to do it. I think we would want to work with the police department, certainly keeping in mind Mr. Hagenau's suggestion, but seeing how far back the police department would want to go. We've worked with the downtown neighborhood resource officers on other projects with residential components where there were concerns about how rooftop open spaces would be operated. So I think, yes, we're encouraging the outdoor amenity, but we're also, I think, supportive of Big Brother and Big Sister monitoring the residents to make sure that everybody's minding their P's and Q's and not launching bottles off onto pedestrians on State Street or the buildings astride.
Thank you. And actually, what you just said brought up something that I hadn't thought of, and to put you on the spot, do you foresee any issue with, by squeezing that balcony, issues with the open space requirements for this development?
We would have to look based on how much squeezing is anticipated. I don't recall that it was a zoning administrator concern in their review. But I also don't see a line item for usable open space. So that is something that we would have to follow up on. I would say that squeezing to the point where the project still conforms with the downtown core district would be the directive from the Plan Commission that we would be looking for.
Thank you.
Mr. Rui?
I had a question. All these lots, they're all 0-foot setback?
On State Street, yes.
So if a building next door wanted to build 6 stories tall, that creates a problem with any windows that are put in or any articulation?
Yeah, this is primarily driven by the building code, but yes, based on the type of construction, the number of openings are pretty strictly dictated by the building code. So regardless of what the zoning code might require in this case, you'd still more importantly have to comply with the building code. And so this building and a building hypothetically that would be proposed at 670 State Street would have to comply with the building code in terms of the allowed openings on their side walls. And so they're providing the amount of openings that they can on the east side, given the space that they have between that wall and the property line, and any air rights or building easements that they may have acquired on that side versus on the west side, where it appears that no such allowances exist. So the building is sealed tightly on that side because it's built at the property line, and there's no ability to have openings because of the construction of the building and the limitations in the building code.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Then a motion, Mr. Cantrell?
I'm going to move approval of this project and finding it consistent with the standards of the conditional use requirements. But in addition, I have some additional conditions I'd like to place on this. Those would include that a 5-foot buffer a minimum of a 5-foot buffer be provided on the east and west sides of the rooftop terrace in compliance, again, with the open space requirements of the downtown core district. That this be referred back to the Urban Design Committee to work with the architect and staff on options on the west elevation to lessen the blank wall appearance of that elevation. And that the Urban Design Commission also addressed the sign size and placement on the State Street elevation concern brought by the UW Credit Union. And lastly, a condition that Commissioner Rui brought up, that wall-mounted bike racks be provided in each of the apartments.
Discussion. Alder Zellers.
I would like to ask a friendly amendment that a management plan be required and that the applicant work with staff to come up with that management plan. Very recent buildings with very good cameras also are subject to problems of bottles being launched at people and windows. So I want to make sure that there's a management plan in place, and I heard the applicant say that that would work. So
Is there
with your, okay?
Well, it's the
Friendly?
friendly amendment requires the consent of the members of the commission. Is there objection to Alder-Zeller's amendment? Seeing none, that's in.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Then all those in favor of the motion as, I'm sorry, Mr. Cantrell.
One other, there was discussion about cameras on the rooftop terrace, and that those cameras do be installed on the rooftop terrace to monitor activity in that area.
Yeah, I would think that the cameras would be incorporated in the management plan that Alder-Zeller's referred to, if that's okay with everybody.
Good.
Anyone else then? Then all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Passes unanimously. I think this would be a good time for a 5-minute break before we take up our final item. We're back in session. The next item on our agenda is item 14, Legistar 47853, a major alteration to an approved conditional use to allow construction of a 3-story addition to the hotel at 1501 Monroe Street. Mr. Parks.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Plan Commission, the application before you is a new proposal to add 3 stories to the existing 4-story hotel Red at 1501 Monroe Street. You did have a 4-story request before you in March that you placed on file. There's an extensive history of Hotel Red, including that project as well as other requests that preceded it in the staff report that was provided to you in your packets. The request before you tonight proposes 39 additional lodging rooms and a 7th floor bar lounge / event space that is described in the plans that were provided as well as in the staff report. Staff does not believe that the request before you can meet these standards for conditional use approval. The project requires a myriad of conditional use approvals. The height of the building is limited to 3 stories and 40 feet in the traditional shopping street zoning district. The proposal before you stands roughly 86 feet in height and is 7 stories as measured from above Monroe. There's also a requirement, because hotels, inns, and motels are conditional uses in the TSS district, that an alteration to the conditional use that exists for the hotel now be considered, as well as modifications to the outdoor eating areas for the hotel and for the non-accessory outdoor event spaces related to events occurring at Camp Randall Stadium, which were approved for the site in 2012. So looking through the entirety of the standards that the project needs to meet, staff does not believe in particular that standards 9 and 12 can be met. Conditional use standard 9 deals with the aesthetics, effectively, of any new building or in addition to an existing building, and requires that the Plan Commission find that the project, quote, creates an environment of sustained aesthetic desirability compatible with the existing or intended character of the area, the statement of purpose of the zoning district, and may require that the applicant provide copies of the plans to the Urban Design Commission for the review and comment. Further, because the building is taller than the allowed height in the TSS district, the Plan Commission must consider the recommendations in adopted plans, impacts on surrounding properties, including the height, mass, orientation, shadows, and view, architectural quality and amenities, the relationship of the proposed building with adjoining streets, alleys, and public rights-of-way, and the public interest in exceeding the district height limitations. In reviewing this project as well as the previous project to add 4 stories to the hotel, staff cannot conclude that the request is consistent with the recommendations of both the comprehensive plan and more particularly the Monroe Street Commercial District Plan. The latter plan was developed in 2007 to provide very specific recommendations for how effectively every property on every block from Regent Street to Glenway Street should be developed or redeveloped in terms of height, building placement, parking placement, et cetera. And that plan very clearly recommends a height of 2 to 4 stories effectively for the entire length of the street. And it's primarily focused on the 3 nodes that include commercial uses, those being from Regent Street down towards Van Buren Street, at Glenway Street down to Adana Road, and then the area that's roughly bounded by Commonwealth Avenue and Crandall Avenue, sort of in the middle of Monroe Street. Along that length, the recommended height is 2 to 4 stories, and the proposed building is clearly much taller than that recommendation. So we feel on a fundamental basis that the request before you is not consistent with those plan recommendations. Further, it really exceeds the anticipated scale and mass in the traditional shopping street district. We don't feel that a 7-story hotel would be consistent in TSS. While there may be some consideration for hotels in TSS, it really comes down to how big this hotel is, not whether there's a hotel at all, but just the proposed scale and mass of the addition. So all of those things are pointing to a negative staff recommendation. You have the full review in your staff reports at your places. We would ask the Plan Commission, should they find that the standards are indeed met with the request, that it give consideration to the advisory recommendation of the Urban Design Commission. The project was presented at the August 2nd Urban Design Commission meeting. You have the report of the Urban Design Commission in your materials. If the Plan Commission wants to approve the project, it should give careful consideration to the design recommendations made by the Urban Design Commission. Likewise, staff is recommending a series of very specific conditions that apply to the operation of the hotel, which stem from the original approval of the hotel in 2008, as well as modifications to a restrictive covenant that was put in place in 2008, but was modified in 2012 as part of the approval of outdoor areas related to the hotel, both for regular operation for the hotel's restaurant, as well as for outdoor areas related to game days at Camp Randall Stadium. So we would ask, if the project is approved, that the Plan Commission consider those conditions as recommended by staff, as well as all of the other conditions recommended by reviewing agencies. I would be happy to answer questions after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. I will open the public hearing. At the request of the applicant, I'm going to take 3 registrants at once, giving them 9 minutes to make their presentation, and then we will have 3 opponents in a row to balance that out. So the initial group includes Alan Fish, 1533 Morrison Street, Jason Ilstrup, 4026 Council Crest, and Michael Erickson, 1501 Monroe Street, all in support, wishing to speak and understanding that when the 9 minutes are up, they may get an additional minute, but that'll be it. Okay?
Thank you, Ken. My name is Alan Fish. I've spent about 25 years planning the UW campus in a variety of different roles. So I spent a lot of time thinking about this intersection when I was in the athletic department and when I was vice chancellor for facilities. And I would say that when we reviewed the staff report, frankly, I agree with almost everything in the staff report on the details of the operational requirements that have been in place at Hotel Red and have been recommended to be continued, and we have no problem with any of those. The one issue I have with the staff report is the fact of this height and elevation and massing not fitting this particular site. So we have an aerial here that we can talk about, and I want to spend just a minute or so thinking about that. So here's the Hotel Red location. A traditional shopping street, which Monroe Street and to a certain extent Regent Street are, is about 50 feet wide. It has room for 2 rows of parking and 2 rows of cars. The the spot from this curb over to the curb on the field house is 150 feet wide, triple the size of a traditional shopping street. My argument here from an urban planning standpoint is that this space is large enough to accommodate large buildings. And in fact, it already does with the field house. And with the Greg Szymanski project being next door and discussions of another 8-story addition to the Regent on the other side where 8 stories is permitted, I would argue that while Monroe Street is a traditional shopping street, this particular location is not. It has a different criteria. All of you were here last spring when we were here to talk about this proposal. And overall, this is what it looked like. And your reaction, the reaction of the neighbors, the reaction of Urban Design Commission, the reaction of many people that we have talked to, including the city staff, was that was too much. And actually that was almost a 9-story addition, because while it added 3 floors of hotel space, the top floor was a double height floor. So to that level, we heard you, and we moved back to a much smaller development. And to show you what that looks like, we put a shadow of the original proposal looking at the front for that 8-story development, and then contrasted it with what we brought you here tonight, which is a significant change. When you look at the front elevation, it was 98 feet, now it's 85 feet. The rear elevation, which I'll show you in a minute, was 110 feet, now it's 90 feet. The overall mass of the building was 76,000 square feet, now it's 66,000 square feet. It was 105 rooms, now it's 87 rooms. And yet, at the same time, the parking capacity, the valet plan, had 80 spaces. It continues to have 80 spaces, so actually from a parking standpoint, it's even better. The other point I would make, moving back on the urban planning standpoint, is this proposal really benefits from the fact that the sun coming from the south creates almost all the shadowing in the intersection. Many times we have developments that not only are large next to residential areas, but they also create a major shadow effect, which can be really disturbing. This particular location puts the shadows in the intersection the best place. Finally, when you look at the other changes we've made, and here's a contrast again. Sorry. So this was the front in the original proposal, and this is the new front. This with about 13 feet reduction in the front and about 20 feet reduction in the back. So you move around back, this was the original proposal, and now here's the new proposal. As we have tried to simplify the design. The other point I would make is that when you look at the west elevation heading towards Monroe Street, there was concern that this was a large blank wall, both here and at the Urban Design Commission. And we've added rooms with balconies to kind of create some interest and activate that area as well. So those are the major changes that we have gone through. When we went to the Urban Design Commission a couple of weeks ago, their issues were all about the front facade and how we could simplify the design of the front facade. So we are in studies with our architects right now. It's a work in progress to try and figure out how we would respond to that. But we are in agreement that that's the direction that we're going to head. So we're going to try and bring a simplified front facade back. I have a couple of studies that can show you the direction we're heading on that at this time. And then the last point I would make is that there was great concern both by the elected officials, by the staff, and by the neighborhood that if we were granted 7 floors here, it would create a precedent for other developments along this traditional shopping street to get 7 floors. And I would argue that they're not in this location. This location with 150 feet across the intersection is very different from the rest of Monroe Street, and one that would require you to have the same conditional use as we would have, and you have ample arguments to say why 2 to 4 stories is required on a traditional shopping street. Our argument is that in this particular intersection, an exception can be and should be made. So I'll stop there. And we can obviously look back at these designs as we talk about this further.
Okay, so next up in this 9-minute stretch is Jason Ilstrup.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Elstrup, the general manager at Hotel Red, and I've been the general manager there since we opened. And we've come to you before with different plans, but I feel that this is the right plan at the right time. And why do I say this? This is the right plan because we've had a good faith effort to work with the neighbors, to work with the city, to work with what you guys said, and with Urban Design Commission to get the best plan possible for this intersection. I, in my heart of hearts, believe this is a really good project that really fits. It also allows us to continue to serve as the good neighbor that I think we already are. We open our space up, we become the public space for that neighborhood, for Regent, for Vilas, for Dungeon Monroe. We consistently bring groups in and let them use our space. We want to continue to do that, and if we add more, we'll be able to do even more. Also, our guests, which this is maybe one of the best things, are able to really help out Monroe Street and the Regent Street merchants. And we send our guests all the time to Brasserie V, Orange Tree Imports, Pizza Bruto, whatever it is. And it's the best thing because they spend Chicago money here in Madison. So that helps create and really enrich one of the most important shopping streets we have that's still independent and still has many independent stores. That's a big thing for us that we continue to do. We also are going to bring in dozens of new employees, and these new employees will be of all ability levels and all levels at the hotel. This really allows us to bring the best people in because we want to do that, because as great as the building is, it's all about the people that are inside of the building, and they're the ones that are going to tell the story of Madison. So we're excited to bring even more team members in. Of course, we then help the local economy. We raise the property tax base, and most importantly on my end is we raise the room tax base. And that room tax money goes into tourism, marketing, and promotion, which brings even more great events like CrossFit, like World Dairy Expo, like Ironman to Madison, to enrich the city to the great place it already is. Why is it the right time? Because if we do this now, we can work in coordination with the Monroe Street reconstruction, which we all know is going to happen in a few months. And we also think, as Alan was bringing up before, that it fits in with the current changes that are happening in our intersection. Greg Szymanski's building has already come out of the ground. The Crazy Legs Park is being talked about, and we're all very excited about the closing of Crazy Legs Lane. UW Athletics has, in their new athletics master plan, they're going to try to enrich and enliven the field house and give it some new windows and give it some new life. That helps the intersection. And there are other developments that are constantly being bandied about down Regent Street. So we would like to be a catalyst to that as well. So we think it is the right time and the right place and the right plan.
Hi, my name is Mike Erickson. I'm the owner and investor in Hotel Red, and I don't know if I have much to add to what Jason and Alan have said, but I do want to thank you for giving us another opportunity to come back and present this modified plan.
That's your 9 minutes. I can give you an additional minute if you can.
That'd be great. That would be great. I just want to say thanks for letting us come back and do this again. I think we put forth a real good effort to listen to what the neighborhood has said, listen to what the Plan Commission said, listen to what UDC said, and we've come up with a solution that we feel is gonna help us in the future. We're, as a smaller hotel, we're a little vulnerable to some of the other bigger hotels that have developed in the last 6 years since we've been here. So we think this design will help us sort of create a more sustainable business and help us to move forward and remain there on the corner. So thanks again for your time.
Are there questions for the three registrants? Seeing none, thank you. In fairness, I will now call three opponents in a row. The first is Fraser Gerd, 1526 Jefferson Street. He'll be followed by Mary Diamond. So Ms. Diamond, if you could be close by, we've got a lot of registrants, so we'll try to keep things moving along. Mr. Gerd, come on up.
Thank you. My name is Fraser Gerd. I live at 1526 Jefferson Street. I just realized that I've been there for 39 years as of a few weeks ago. And you, maybe in your electronic packet, have my letter, and I also appended my 2008 letter because it's been so long ago. I was lucky to find it. I didn't know if the Plan Commission would find it. At that time, we had a history of noise coming from on high, the Regent apartment building. I was concerned with the height being inconsistent with the then comprehensive plan and neighborhood plans. And I was really concerned about the room mix. Now, my letter earlier was at the time of the demolition permit application, so it was even before they went ahead with it. And I think I was not the only person that was telling the developer, don't go with almost all suites because that room mix will kill you. And they are not happy with that room mix. That's one thing that their addition would seek to rectify. And I was very concerned because if the hotel had failed, then something would be there, but it wouldn't receive this kind of consideration. The hotel is a good neighbor, period. I'm switching to my this year letter, but I continue to feel that the proposed addition is not consistent with the existing plans as well stated in staff report. I'm concerned with opportunity for noise starting up high, going back into the neighborhood. If I were involved in this project, I would probably do almost exactly what they're seeking to do. Get a good room mix. I would not do what they're doing on the upper level because I think it cuts down their opportunities. I think that east open terrace, which is a great idea, 15 or 20 days out of the year, would be better served by being glassed in. You'd still be able to see the Capitol. You would have a two-prong use of the upper areas. And so I think that, you know, they do a good job and all that kind of thing. But nonetheless, the primary considerations are whether or not this fits in terms of room mix. I know that AC Hotel and Graduate and everybody.
Sum up in a minute?
Certainly can, thank you. And this, and an earlier project tonight, I mean, the rooftop seems to be where it is. And if you recall a recent article in the New York Times bemoaning the disappearance of islands of calm and serenity in New York City, cited as one of the things that really damages them as things like rooftop parties, as well as sirens and construction and all the normal things. So I don't happen to think that it's a unique situation. I am happy that shadows fall in the street, but an urban boundary by a wide area is the same as an urban boundary with a narrow area. So thank you very much.
Questions for Mr. Gerd? Mr. Shepherd?
Hi, just to follow up on your comment. So are you saying that that an outdoor terrace, even though it sounds like you would not want it, it would be, if it were glassed in, that would mitigate the problems?
Well, just as staff said, if you go ahead and do this, please pay attention to what urban design said. I would say if for some reason you went ahead and granted the three-story addition, then please do not have that eastern area because that is a noise generator up in the air, ready access to the neighborhood. But just so that I'm being clear, I'm against it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Polewski.
Mr. Gerd, as I understand it, maybe I'm wrong and someone will doubtlessly correct me. As I understand it, coming back in for a conditional use revision opens up the original conditional use, correct? So, Mr. Gerd, bearing in mind that the developers have now asked us to essentially review the entire ball of wax, how would you feel about a condition of approval saying that all of the balconies need to be enclosed, all of the outside areas need to be enclosed, all of the windows need to be non-operable in order to reduce the noise and party hotel atmosphere.
I think my request, probably in both letters, was that the ones on the alley side be, where possible, closed and things like that. However, I recognize the city's interest in usable open space. And so that I do not think, based on the discussion earlier with Tim's, that I would not ask for enclosing all of the balconies, and nor would I ask on their plan for the northern area. They have a roof that goes up so that it kind of bites off more of the sky facing north or northwest or whatever that is. And for much of the year, that's north light is beautiful, steady kind of light. And they've emphasized that their major tie is with the field house, and that's the view that field house, so that they can wave at the folks over there and down below and all that. So I would not go extreme and just say button up the hotel, because that's unreasonable. But as somebody who's almost been hit several times by things thrown out of the Regent apartment building over the years, one time a big chunk of ice, I am sensitive to gravity.
One of those laws you have to obey all the time. I'm concerned about the noise effects of this whole ball of wax. Seems to me that I don't live in the area, so I'm asking for some advice here. It seems to me that having noisy parties on the balconies anywhere is going to adversely affect the neighborhood behind. Has that been your experience?
Well, my experience is that there are right now precious few balconies that are on the neighborhood side. There's ones that I think last time I referred to it as out on the bowsprit, the part that faces east, and there's a big balcony on each of those. But other than that, they all face the other way. And
You don't hear anything from the parties on those balconies. Is that what you're telling me?
That is not a regular source of annoyance to me.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Rui?
You were talking about the east balcony on the top one?
Yes, sir.
Just the top one?
Well, of the proposal.
Of the proposed one.
Proposal, yeah.
What would you think if it was just that noise glass wall be put only on the alley side? Would that work for you?
I think that would be terrific. I think it'd be a bad business decision, because if it's all enclosed.
No, just on that top one that you're talking about.
Yep.
Not all enclosed, just glass as sort of a noise barrier on the alley side.
That would do it for noise, probably.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Gerd. Mary Diamond, 1518 Jefferson Street, opposed, wishing to speak, to be followed by Betsy Rapaski. So Ms. Rapaski, if you could be close by, that would be helpful.
Hi, I am Mary Diamond, and I've lived at 1518 Jefferson Street for about 11 years. We own the home, and my husband bought the house in '91. And I oppose, I'm generally opposed. Personally, I don't think the building, the way it looks, enhances either the corner or Monroe Street at all. It's my personal opinion. I don't think that 7 floors is a good thing as opposed to 8. I think that 4 floors is a good thing, because that's what we already have. As far as noise is concerned, we have no way of knowing what would be coming off of that rooftop beer garden. One assumes, I don't hear noise from the balconies in the front or on the side right now. Probably because I would assume they're only having parties out there on game days, and on game days, you hear, we have a beer garden, which is next door to us on the ground level. And so I don't know what's coming off of onto State Street, nor do I walk up there to find out. Even though Hotel Red has been a good neighbor, everybody tells me, I have no desire to go there for any reason whatsoever. I find it chilling, and even though there's 150 feet, I was told, I find that claustrophobic. My background is in art, and I've lived in the neighborhood because I love the Vilas neighborhood. I love the trees, the older homes. I love Monroe Street. And this, to me, is strange. I could say more negative things, but I think I'm on TV, so I won't. I'm sorry, I just don't see this. I understand that it benefits the developer, but I don't see that it benefits the Vilas neighborhood, which sits in its, all the homeowners are attempting to keep this neighborhood nice. We maintain, we mow the lawns, we're trying really hard to keep it good, and we do care. And when I look at this, to me, it's chilling. I just don't see it. And I'm sorry that I'm not being supportive of business, but I'm not a business person. So I'm a homeowner, and I used to live in Barneveld for 10 years, and I drove up Monroe Street and turned right at that intersection to get to my apartment, which is Weeks Hall. I'm very aware of how the traffic is there. I was rear-ended, and my car was totaled half a block from this location. I had a good friend hit by a drunk on Monroe Street, a pedestrian, and permanently disabled. Another acquaintance was killed crossing Randall and Regent Street, a pedestrian. To me, if you need to get a chair and plop yourself across Regent Street from Hotel Red and just sit there for one day and see what you see what goes on. It's dirty, it's noisy, and I just have no desire to go up to that corner and go in and have a beer. I'm sorry. I go to the Laurel, by the way. That's my take on getting a drink. Thank you. That's all I have. Anybody have a question for me? I'm sorry to be
yes.
so emotional, but I feel very strongly.
It's okay. Mr. Polewski.
Thank you, Mrs. Diamond.
Mary, yeah.
I agree with you. My personal opinion is that this is one of the ugliest buildings in the city of Madison, bar none. Could you be persuaded to accept a larger building if it were less brutalist architecture?
Larger?
Larger.
Okay.
Supposing the condition were to enclose all the balconies with glass and put a nice color brick cladding on it so that it wasn't so in your face.
Soften
Would that
it.
help?
I
Soften
mean,
it?
the neighborhood is Victorian, essentially. This, to me, I like looking at the back of the field house. I see that from my kitchen window. And I like it because, first of all, I'm very proud of the university, but that facade was hand-built, hand-designed, the stone hand-cut, and every one of those stones, I'm sure, hand-laid at one point. And that matters to me. I think of those workmen and what they had to do that. And I guess I'm a romantic because I'm a painter, and I'm also a graphic designer. That matters to me, that sense of why we love Madison, why we love this neighborhood. And what's happening with a lot of this contemporary architecture. When they said this was special, I thought, it looks like every other building you see, only I don't like that red. What is that red? It's kind of orangey. I don't like that plastic. But the whole thing is cold. And so, okay, I'll agree with you there. If it weren't so brutalist, maybe. And also I'm concerned about the traffic, the pedestrians. They say they're going to control all of that. It remains to be seen, but mostly it's the visual that bothers me and the persistence that if you don't support this, you're not, what's the word for, they're achieving something important or something, and that's not my concern.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, it's not.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Rui?
Thank you. How far are you down the street from the Scotty Bar?
One house.
One house. I assume there's a lot of noise coming from that.
Actually,
often?
no. They
Often?
have, no. That, told Kelly Jordan, I would give her a Good Neighbor Award. She has improved that situation in that bar 100%.
Well, what's your, on game weekends?
100%, except for the beer, we don't object to the beer garden. That was never our objection. The beer garden.
So actually any event. I think they're
7
limited to
times a
any
year.
event. Yeah.
I understand. I see the stadium, I see all the 40,000 people walking the streets in their red clothes, fine. I know where I live, but no, as far as after, in between times, when we had so much trouble when it was Lucky's, none of it. It has gone completely away. She or whoever is managing that situation is doing a fabulous job.
Yeah, thank you. So management is a key to whatever happens.
Well, no, to me, in this case, the appearance.
Well, you're talking about aesthetics. I'm talking about management.
Well, obviously, I don't know. I mean, I just know, I don't know managers. I know Kelly, and that she's the only manager
Would you
I know.
agree that the current manager at the Hotel Red's been pretty good?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I am
Okay.
in no position to
Okay,
judge that. I
thank
don't
you.
go there.
Thank you. Anyone else from Ms. Diamond? Thank you. I misspoke. Ms. Rapaski won't be immediately next, but one after. The next registrant is Neil Lord, 1518 Jefferson Street, opposed, wishing to speak. The third
Hi, my name
opponent.
is Neil Lord. I'm the husband of Mary Diamond who just spoke. I own two houses, one at 1518 Jefferson Street and one at 1522 Jefferson Street. Mary and I live in the closest one to Regent Street, and the next one we rent out to our tenants. And I'm concerned for both of the places because, of course, any detriment that I would see in my house, my renters would see in the adjacent one. But I'm concerned about the precedent that this sets, making so anyone who wants to build on Regent Street can ask for more floors than the original plan, the neighborhood plan. Looking at the building plan, you can kind of see that Hotel Red has plans in the future, even after this expansion, if it gets approved, that they'll take over the space that's currently being used by the barber shop and the two restaurants adjacent to them to give them another 30% of space, which would be make the hotel larger. In fact, I questioned them as to why they didn't just, if they need the extra space, why didn't they just approach the three landowners there to expand sideways rather than going up? They certainly wouldn't have the objection from the neighbors as they do now. They're currently asking for 7 floors. Going sideways, they wouldn't have that objection. I'm also concerned about the having the operation on the rooftop. One of the reasons they have church bells on the towers is because sound carries much farther. And if you're going to have people having a big party and amplified music on the top story, it doesn't matter if you put up a wall, the sound is going to carry into the neighborhood. And so that is a big concern of mine. Let's see. So that combined with the noise, the precedent setting for future construction in Regent Street is why I'm opposed, and hopefully you'll take that into consideration tonight. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Lord? Seeing none, thank you, sir. So now, Betsy Rapaski, 2208 Regent Street, in support, wishing to speak. To be followed by Carol Borcherding. If Ms. Borcherding could be relatively close, that would be helpful. Welcome, sorry for the mix-up.
I'm Betsy Rapask, and I've lived in the neighborhood for about 4 years. I'm actually in my second residence now. I rented on Lathrop and then loved the neighborhood so much that I bought. And we love Hotel Red. For us, it is a meeting point. We have friends who live just off Spooner and some who live farther down Monroe, and we use that patio kind of as our living room. Not all the time, but for us, it's as valuable as the other restaurants and establishments along Monroe. And they're good neighbors. We actually hosted a benefit for the Madison Parks Foundation there last January, and they not only donated a space and gave us money for food, but they also donated a silent auction item. And we feel like they are not only good stewards of the neighborhood, but of Madison itself. They function as a gateway to our unique neighborhood that does feel like a neighborhood. It's not just Madison. It's not like going downtown. You get to know Madison residents, and we can speak personally to that. When we've been in Brasserie V, we've met people who are staying at Hotel Red who wouldn't be in our neighborhood otherwise, and then have come back and stayed at Hotel Red multiple times because they get to know Madison and its people, not just downtown. Like, I love Capitol Square, but it is, right, it's not necessarily a neighborhood. It is the Capitol and big buildings, and it feels like a city, but Monroe is home, and we get to, through Hotel Red, we get to share that. And I think that having the extra stories just means we get to share that with more people. And the extra space upstairs we're excited about, because when we have Madison Parks Foundation, because we can intend on and having that benefit there every year going forward, we'll be able to see more of Madison and to see the green space that the money that we are raising goes towards. So for us, Hotel Red isn't a detriment anyway. And aesthetically, and my background is in design, I feel that having seen it now, Hotel Red looks unfinished. It looks like they chopped the top off. And so whether it is this plan or the previous one, I think it makes it look complete. So I guess I'm probably the exact opposite to what you've heard from the past three people, that I feel it adds to the neighborhood and the aesthetic is better. And though most people, don't disagree that they are poor stewards, Hotel Red is a good neighbor. But I think beyond that, they do add something to the neighborhood, not just through the effort they put in, but they bring people, and we do use it, like, quite frequently.
Can you summarize?
We feel that Hotel Red brings people to the neighborhood and introduces people to Madison in a way that larger hotels do not. Aesthetically, I feel that the new design makes it complete. Is probably the two strongest points.
Thank you. Are there questions for Ms. Rapaski? There are. Alder Carter.
Yes, thank you. Can you tell me, have you been to the hotel outside of a game day?
Yes.
And can you tell me the type of clients that stay there?
We've met a couple of startup owners. One who owns a company that goes into, actually they went into West High School and redid their menu so that they use fresh and local food. We've met a number of agents of TV personalities, but who stay there because it allows them to connect to the city. We've seen a number of people who are recruits for UW. For the most part, they are professional people who are coming through there. We're younger than most of the people who stay there. But I wouldn't say that they are rowdy or disrespectful. They stay there because they want to be part of the neighborhood and because they do enjoy Madison, and most of them are repeat customers.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Polewski?
Mr. Rapaski, do you know if any of the people that you've met through Hotel Red will stop coming to Hotel Red because they're not allowed to build another 3 or 4 or 2 stories?
I doubt it. I don't think they'll stop coming because they don't have the additional space, but I do think it's possible they might come more, because at only 48 rooms, it's not uncommon, I'd imagine. I mean, I don't know how often they're actually full, but at 48 rooms, I'd imagine that if that's the place you want to stay, that sometimes you can't, and the additional rooms could possibly increase that.
Mr. Shepherd?
Hi, just a quick comment from you in terms of the design, since you have a background in design. Just based on you said this new proposal is an improvement over what they have. What do you find is once again improves it, just in terms from a visual sense?
The way it is right now, it doesn't come to a culmination anyway. It's it is brutalist architecture, but it is very flat. There's no point that it builds toward. And in this new one, with that glass atrium, it does, and then as it tapers off at the back, it seems to sort of all come to a point at the front. And I feel like that makes it feel finished. Right now, it seems a little bit like someone lobbed off the top of the building.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Ms. Rapaski. Next up, Carol Borcherding, 1524 Jefferson Street, opposed, to be followed by Bernie Lang. Could Bernie Lang be ready to go next? Ms. Borcherding, welcome.
Hi, my name is Carol Borcherding. I oppose the addition of the 3 floors to Hotel Red. I've lived in the neighborhood for 21 years, just 2 blocks away, and I'm very disappointed that I need to return to this room to oppose the increase in height. I don't know how many of you were here 9 years ago when Hotel Red was approved. They were given 1 additional floor at that time to be the capstone of Monroe Street. And the Planning Commission at that time was not very happy with the process of how everything happened, and they let the Violet Neighborhood Association know that this was going to be the terminal height. At that point, no floors would be considered. Now, 2 times in the last 6 months, Hotel Red has put forth a proposal. This proposal now is for 3 stories. And it appears also that the city encourages it because it was not denied back in April. The request for 3 stories is not conforming to the Monroe Street plan. All the other developments on Monroe have conformed to this floor limit. This increase will almost double the improved plan height currently for Monroe Street. This should not be approved as is non-conforming and hurts the properties in the adjoining Violet neighborhood. It's very troubling having a beer garden patio on the top floor. This will increase the noise, increase the probing of being able to look into the neighborhood. It will be unsightly height from the back side because of its size. It will limit the view of the sky and the sun that we have when it's setting. And it's towering over 2-story houses. We've seen long-term change in traffic and density and in crime. The city spent a lot of effort in the past couple of years to try to make Violet's neighborhood inviting to families, and now the city is chipping away at what makes this neighborhood special. Concern for less regulation on activities in the hotel regarding alcohol and noise, as hotels don't have the same regulations and constraints as do the bars. The Planning Commission should follow through with previous agreements with the neighborhood and not add these additional floors. This project needs to conform to the Monroe Street plan. Everything dealing with developments is also becoming an exception, and that is the way that it gets approved, to bypass these rules. Why do we create these plans if they're not going to be followed? I am disappointed at the lack of information regarding this project. We, the neighborhood, hear more about the Monroe Street bus stops than we have heard about this important development issue throughout the summer. Many residents from the neighborhood are not able to attend the meeting tonight because they didn't know about it, but we are opposed to this increase. Thank you very much.
Questions from Ms. Borcherding? Seeing none, thank you. Bernie Lang, 1706 Madison Street, in support, to be followed by Jera Bodley. Welcome, Mr. Lang.
Hi, my name is Bernie Lang, and I live at 1706 Madison Street. And this proposal, the proposed addition really makes sense to me. Hotel Red is a hub, bringing together the Regent Street residential corridor, the Regent Street commercial corridor, Camp Randall, and I think most importantly, the Monroe Street neighborhood shops. They all benefit from Hotel Red's existence. Specifically, supporting the Monroe Street shops and keeping them sustainable is key to helping the neighborhood, keeping the neighborhood unique and desirable, which I think really bolsters the value of our homes. Retail is very competitive. The Monroe Street shops benefit from all sales. Certainly hotel occupants visit and support these shops. My wife and I do our part. We probably visit the shops 3 to 4 times a week. My fear is that without increasing sales support, failing businesses could expedite a canyon effect along Monroe Street. That will certainly take away from the uniqueness of my neighborhood and why I moved here in the first place.
That completes your testimony. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Jera Bodley, 809 Grant Street, Madison, opposed, wishing to speak, to be followed by Carol Schrader. Welcome, Ms. Bodley.
Thank you. My name's Jera Bodley, and I live at 809 Grant Street. I share the same alley as Hotel Red. I oppose the Hotel Red 3-story expansion proposal. This proposal should not be considered for conditional use or spot zoning. When Bob Seeger presented the building design at multiple Violet neighborhood information sessions,
He explained his architectural style involves cement and colored glass. He was unapologetic and defended his creativity. The city approved the building plans, and we have the results. What I observed at the urban design meeting on August 2nd was that the architects did not feel additional stories would improve the design. Adding more height won't improve the look of Hotel Red. Adding more height won't help the city with infill. Adding more height to a building that has reached its zoning limit won't bring into character with the residential properties. As they say, you can put lipstick on a pig and it's still a pig. The Hotel Red can make changes to the exterior to soften its cement look. The city has already given height extensions to the original plan, which makes the building taller than its original plan was approved for. We were promised by the city this building would not exceed 4 stories. The neighborhood has already determined that the 7-story building is not a fit for the Monroe Street Commercial District plan. This discussion should not have to take place because this expansion is out of line with the City of Madison Monroe Street Commercial District plan. There's more to discuss, specifically the speed and timing of this proposal that has been pushed through. The number of Vilas residents who are unaware of this plan or tonight's meeting. But these items are too lengthy to discuss and time permitting. Thank you.
Are there questions for Ms. Bodley? Mr. Rui? Sorry.
Excuse me. I was troubled when you said you live on the same alley. How far away do you live?
3 blocks away. They're at one end of the alley, I'm at the other end, or
Right.
on one end of the block, and I'm at the other end of the block. But if you take the alley, the connecting alley, we're 3 blocks apart.
Okay, so you're right behind Art Gecko?
Right.
And sort of diagonally across the street from Trader Joe's? And that tall,
Correct.
and that tall complex? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Ms. Bodley.
Thank you.
Carol Schrader, 1909 West Lawn, in support wishing to speak, representing the Monroe Street Merchants Association and Orange Tree Imports, to be followed by Eileen Thompson.
Thank you for having me here this evening. I have been on Monroe Street for 42 years as a business owner. I've been head of the Monroe Street Merchants Association for 40 years. I'm not speaking officially as president of the Monroe Street Merchants Association because we do not take a stand on zoning issues, but I can say on behalf of the merchants that we could not have a better neighbor than Hotel Red. We have held so many of our meetings at Hotel Red. They have never said no to any request by the neighborhood. Many of the meetings about the upcoming road work, which has us quivering in our shoes, have been held there. And it's no understatement that the number of customers that they have brought to our businesses has been important, and especially in the day of challenges from online shopping, really almost a deal breaker. I'm probably the only person here who attended almost all of the meetings about the Monroe Street commercial plan back in 2007. I was one of the, pardon the pun, one of the architects of that. And really our focus at the time was on getting Ken Kopp's replaced by a viable grocery store, which we eventually succeeded in doing with Trader Joe's and Monroe Commons. We never dreamt of a hotel at the corner by the stadium. It never crossed our minds that that might be happening. So we're thrilled that it is there. We feel that the height issue is not really as applicable there. And frankly, the discussion of a beer garden on top of the new remodeled hotel has me a little concerned because from what I understand, that's not at all what the rooftop addendum will be used for. It will be used for neighborhood meetings, for small group receptions, for those staying in the hotel who want to have a place to get together and study or have a beer after their day's work. And people staying in a hotel are very concerned about noise, so there's no way that Hotel Red is going to have noisy parties happening when their guests are trying to sleep downstairs. So I would like to come out in favor, in terms of the aesthetics of the building, I'm afraid I also think it's pug ugly, and I do think that adding some proportioned height will improve the way it looks. We kind of have grown used to it. We love what it does for our neighborhood, but it wouldn't have been my choice of aesthetic either, but there it is. And I do think that it's more handsome with the additional stories to give it some proportion. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Alder Carter?
If I recall, Trader Joe's wasn't the first choice as a grocery store, correct?
Oh, we didn't really have any other choices. There was not a grocery store
There
willing
was
to go
a
in there.
desire to have other,
Our desire was not Trader Joe's. Our desire would
Right.
have been Century.
and the Commons was taller than most
Yes.
people liked. And
Yes.
so how does the residents feel about both Trader Joe's and Monroe
Thank you
Street
for asking about
Commons?
that. As you heard from my introduction, I live at 1909 West Lawn Avenue. So it's 2 doors down from my house. I can't see rainbows. That's my big objection. I used to be able to see rainbows over Kent Copse. But I was concerned about 50 new units, 2 doors down from my house, all the additional traffic, all the additional dogs, and it has hardly been noticeable. It's really amazing. And the height is something that you get used to. One of the things I learned from that whole discussion is about urban infill. I wanted Monroe Street to stay the way it was when I came. You know, we have a 1-story building. But I learned from that process that if you keep your 1-story and 2-story buildings, then you send out sprawl into the surrounding areas, and having urban infill helps support the small businesses on the street and helps keep Madison a tighter community. So I've grown to love it. I learned a lot from that process.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Then thank you. Eileen Thompson, 311 Campbell Street, opposed, wishing to speak, to be followed by Greg Szymanski. Mr. Szymanski, if you could be relatively close, that would be helpful.
Hi, I'm Eileen Thompson. I've been living on Campbell Street, 3 blocks down Oakland and up the hill. I've been there since '93, so it puts me past about 25 years. The City of Madison Monroe Street Commercial District Plan, it was created by 3 neighborhoods, not just Violas, 3 neighborhood associations, Violas, Dungeon Monroe, and the Regent Street neighborhood, in collaboration with the Monroe Street merchants and the City of Madison Planning and Engineering divisions. The planning process was initiated and motivated by neighborhood residents' concerns that rapid commercial development on Monroe Street corridor could negatively impact the residential areas that surround and support the businesses. The plan was designed to balance commercial interests and the quality of life in our neighborhood. Its goal is to allow for sensible, sustainable growth on Monroe Street while avoiding any negative effects of overdevelopment, such as increased traffic, parking congestion, noise levels, encroachment on the housing stock, and the lowering potentially of the property value and the urban canyon effect of having higher buildings. Since the plan was introduced, all the developments on Monroe Street, give or take a story or two, have respected the guidelines, and particularly in recommendation that the commercial development should have the maximum height of 4 stories. The developments include Empire Place at 1917 Monroe Street, Knickerbocker Place at 2701 Monroe Street, the Parman Place that has the gates in Brovey. It is at the other end on the other node, the 3414 Monroe Street, the Glenway development, and even the new 1603 to 1609 Monroe Street project. Allowing Hotel Red to have the additional 3 stories to its existing 4-story building, to me, violates the spirit of the Monroe Street Commercial District Plan, and it sets a precedence for future developments that will be out of character for those neighborhoods. The Monroe Street District Plan will then lose credibility and value if we start letting businesses be exempt on a case-by-case basis, or what everyone is referring to as spot zoning or unique zoning. Allowing Hotel Red the additional 3 stories opens doors for uncontrolled growth. Now, I also have included a petition that multiple neighbors have put together. You should have all received that. Hotel Red has been a positive influence on the neighborhood, and I think it's safe to say that we all wish them to have continued success. However, we also want the current balance between commercial development
summarize in a
and the
minute,
quality
please?
of life in the neighborhood to be maintained. Many of us consider that the expansion of Hotel Red tips that balance. And in a negative direction that only compounds future enterprises and also they'll all make similar cases for exemptions. The petition has been signed by approximately 158 members of the neighborhood that requests the Planning Commission to not exempt Hotel Red from these restrictions and height limitations, and to continue to follow the 4-story restriction on building height.
Does that conclude your testimony?
Yes, unless there's, I think there's some really great comments
Are there questions?
on
Are
the
there
petition.
Are there questions for the registrant? Seeing none, thank you. Greg Szymanski, 2945 Monroe Street, in support, wishing to speak, to be followed by Tim Lacy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Greg Szymanski. I have had my office within a block of this for the last 15 years, and I'm doing a development right now in the 1600 block of Monroe. As I was driving down here tonight, I remembered those of us who've been around a while just a few short years ago when this was an abandoned hotel development that created great anxiety for the neighborhood and also was a rather contentious relationship with the neighborhood between it and the developer architect. I think the Erickson family has stepped in and invested in this property and done a remarkable job in making it what it is today, and continues to invest in the property and reinvest with their manager to do a great job. I think that this type of property is called boutique, which is sort of another word for unique or special, and I think this is a special neighborhood and a special development, and they enhance each other. This is the convergence of 3 neighborhoods and an institutional use. And with all due respect to the neighborhood plan that I've read a number of times, I don't think, as Orange Shed, there was ever an anticipation there would be a hotel on this site at that time and what we have today. I think when you look at my development, this development, the redoing of Crazy Legs Park, which will be a great enhancement, the potential redevelopment of the Associated Bank site and across the street, this neighborhood is coming together. It's becoming dynamic, and it's a great place that will make the neighborhood better because of what it is. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Szymanski? Thank you, sir. Tim Lacy, 2208 Regent Street, in support, wishing to speak, to be followed. I believe he's the last registrant wishing to speak. Mr. Lacy?
A number of the things that I wanted to talk to or kind of address tonight have been brought up by multiple presenters before, so I'll kind of go over them. I agree with Mr. Fish. I don't think the TSS zoning designation necessarily fits that corner. If you look at every other building on that corner, they all far exceed the four-story height. I firmly believe that where the shops start, about 2 blocks up farther away, that traditional shopping street designation is much more appropriate. But then you get past that and you're primarily residential for a long ways on Monroe Street. So it's a diverse street, and I think this corner lends itself to a diverse project. It's a diverse looking building. It doesn't meet everybody's design aesthetic and personal opinion, but to me, is the building offensive? No, it is not offensive. It's not, would I build it? No. But I don't drive by. I drive by that intersection on average 3 or 4 times a day, and not once do I curse the site of that building. It's there. I actually think it blends pretty well into with the gray. If it's anything but a crystal clear blue day, I think it's a pretty just kind of blends into the sky for the most part. It's just kind of there. So they're a great steward to the neighborhood. I don't think this is inappropriate by any means as a height increase. I was in favor when it was a story more. I do agree that this is probably a good kind of conciliatory move from the developers and the hotel to address some of the height concerns, and especially on the backside, coming down nearly 20 feet. So as far as that goes, I do think they bring a lot into a very vibrant shopping district. I mean, Paul Soglin talks about State Street and wanting shopping, and we can't get shopping on State Street to really stick there. Yet Monroe Street, in spite of the tradition, in spite of the trends nationwide for retail shopping, seems to be very vibrant for shopping. And I would surmise that having a nice hotel anchor on one corner of that street is a pretty good benefit to it. So,
Thank you, Mr. Lacy. Other questions? Seeing none, thank you. I believe the remaining registrants are not wishing to speak. Barb Sanford, 1211 Garfield Street, opposed. Mary Claire Murphy, 1910 Jefferson Street, opposed. Richard Scott, 811 Oakland Avenue, neither supporting nor opposing, but not wishing to speak and available to answer questions. Before I close the public hearing, are there questions for any of the registrants? Whoa, lots of lights. Mr. Rui first, who would you like back?
Someone from the development staff to talk about the 7-story beer garden.
Okay.
In fact, I want to talk about questions about the 7-story in general.
Yeah, absolutely.
First of all, what's the intent of the beer garden?
Well, we're not calling it a beer garden.
I know, that's why.
So the outdoor space would be the two spaces, obviously on the Regent Street side and then the Monroe Street side, sort of where those large two red rectangles will be, two sort of outdoor plazas, both which face the intersection, which is key to us. We do want to send the noise in the direction of Monroe Street and Regent Street, because there is a tremendous amount of noise there already. And get that noise going that direction has not been offensive to the neighbors already on the balconies, as we've heard from many of the residents today. So we want to keep the noise going that direction. When it comes to actual game days, though, we do agree with what Tim Parks has said in his report, that we would try to keep that to a private ticketed event for everything that goes on upstairs. The majority of the space indoors is an banquet space. It's about 1,800, 2,000 square feet, which could be rented out by anyone or used by the neighborhood or whatever it is. So that space, there you go. Or wherever he's going with it. There we go. That space out right there becomes sort of an outdoor space for that banquet space. And then the other side becomes a little bit more of a lounge. So the glass space will have a small bar and then sort of soft seating, and that'll be available sort of 7 a.m. to maybe, whatever the restrictions are, 10 p.m., 11 p.m., for our guests to go up there. We're seeing that a lot of millennial travelers in particular like to spend time outside of their room. And so they would come down either that first floor lounge, which we already have, we see that already. They go down, work on their computers, whatever it is, or they go upstairs and do that there. We wouldn't serve there all the time, obviously. We'd only serve in the afternoons. But we would have, coffee up there or water, and we'd go up there every once in a while.
The other question, the one resident made a comment on the noise coming off the east balcony.
Sure.
Would you be agreeable to put some kind of glass wall or whatever on the side that faces the alley?
Yeah, so that side sort of right off that angle there.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had a neighborhood meeting and we discussed, several options we could do there, planters or different ways to get that noise off.
Planters doesn't do much. It
Yeah.
takes about 200 feet of planters to make it work.
So that is a concern that the noise would then be going off of that balcony, off into the neighborhood.
Direct question, would
Yeah.
you be agreeable to some sort of glass wall?
Yeah, I think we can.
Architecturally
Absolutely.
you could make it look good.
Sure. Yeah, it wouldn't be too different from what you see at sort of the AC Marriott now, where they have a little bit of a higher glass, which kind of keeps the crowd in, plus it also keeps the noise in. So yeah, absolutely.
So that's one thing I was
Yeah.
looking for. That's and all the other thing up on, nothing else, no other opening faces that alley on the 7th floor. Is that correct?
No, correct. Absolutely. So the
Other than
backside. I'm
just,
sorry. Go
just
ahead.
the east balcony.
Correct.
At this point.
So if you look at the backside, that's the reassessment is just for on the other side right there. That is not open to the public. That'll be just the only people out there will be hotel staff to clean up or do whatever, leaves, things like that.
Okay.
I guess you wouldn't get leaves that high, but you could get other
So the
leaves.
only issue is the east balcony for noise
Correct.
coming back that
We
direction.
purposely do not want to send noise towards the neighborhood, so we are amenable to that
Okay.
compromise. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Shepherd next, and for the same people?
Yes.
They'll work. Two questions. You should be able to address these. One, I'll just ask these and then you can respond to them.
Absolutely.
The first question is, you had and some of this was addressed already, the UDC report. I'm just wondering why you didn't seem to address more of UDC's very particular comments that they had here in terms of design and color. They talk about, again, that in terms of the development, it needs to have, I think they call it axial relationship, you know, and those sorts. So one, did you look closely at those, and did you just not have time to address them in more detail to maybe update your drawings? The second question I have, and this is more just, again, people have commented on the design and that. So when I look at this, I'm just wondering, is there something about the structure of the building, the way it was put together, that limits what you can do in terms of design? The reason I'm asking this is, it sounds horrible, but the World Trade Center, what used to be the World Trade Center, that had it had a design where the actual external structure held the building up, so you could have more floor space inside. Is this constructed in a similar manner, or is there something about the design that limits you in terms of what you can do? For example, we've heard some people already mention in terms of a number of people are not happy with the color selection and some other things. Again, it would seem that one way to maybe, I don't know, enhance the project and bring it closer to what some of UDC's comments would be to, if it's possible, get rid of the gray cement look. If there's some way to, once again, do this in a different color, a different design that would bring it in a better relationship to the area. So UDC's comments and then the structure and design of the building.
Well, the structure I'll answer first. The World Trade Center did have an exterior structure.
Right.
This does not. This has a regular concrete skeleton inside.
Okay.
So it will not, it's a post-beam construction. It's not going to have the same structural characteristics as that particular building.
Okay, so there's nothing really about that design that would prevent you from meeting some of the
Right.
comments that UDC.
And then answering your UDC
Okay.
comment is, no, we had that meeting a little over a week ago.
Right.
We didn't have time to address all their comments. I think as we summarized the UDC meeting, they did not talk at all about height or massing. They actually said they thought we made improvements on 3 sides of the building. The front side is where they said it's too complex, maybe even chaotic, and can you please figure out a way to simplify and create a better palette for that front facade?
Yeah, they talked about it wrapping around the corner, and they said something also about if you go.
Do we need all
particular
those
4
setbacks?
stories.
Can we simplify the face? Is there a way to use the red more as an accent color and
Right.
less as a dominant color?
Right.
So all of those, this is a very preliminary sketch. This is a work in progress that we've done in the last week with our design team to try and clean up some of the responses we had from UDC. This is not what we would finally submit to go at, but it shows that we heard what they said. Our architecture team is working on that, and that we would probably have a new facade design that would not significantly change the operational requirements of the hotel.
So you
but
can do
would
better.
respond to the UDC's concerns. We know we have more work to do there.
Okay, thank you.
Alder Carter.
Yeah, and I'm going to continue with this group. Anyway, I was gonna say something. So if you look at this, poster right here, can you pull that one up?
Sure.
I'm also looking at UDC's, comments, because I think that,
When you're thinking for?
yes, because I think in the back where you have that red line going up and down, in the rear is.
Elevator, the new elevator shaft,
Yes, I mean, that's very prominent, and it anchors, but the 2 red enclaves in the top just totally detracts, and I think that was in UDC's comments, and I would hope that you would really
Yes, ma'am.
work on that, because I think this design is very attractive compared to the last one. and I just don't want you to lose that momentum. With that said, when we go to the banquet room, which you said was next to this area, that the one with that part on that side is actually going to be open for the banquet area?
Correct.
For dinners, et cetera?
Yep.
And then the other side, did you say that was not gonna be open?
No, so yeah, that side will be more towards the general guests that are staying, or the
Okay.
neighbors, things like that. The other side could be rented out possibly by that banquet room just behind it. Those two red panels, that is where the banquet room is, at 1,800 square feet.
We were talking about the upper area. This is the elevator shaft you were talking about.
Yes.
This upper area there is recessed and not, there would be
This is
no
the old
deck
drawing.
access whatsoever.
Yeah, it's the old drawing.
Oh, sorry.
That one.
There we go. So this, in the new drawing, that area is not an outdoor deck. The two outdoor decks that were in this plan
Are in the
was
front.
this one on the corner and the
Okay.
one facing north across towards the field house.
Well, I
And the
think-
one that Commissioner Rouet was talking about putting a panel on is right there. Is that
Okay.
correct? Yep. Yep.
Are you,
Well, I was just gonna say, let the elevator shaft guide you.
The UDC's had made many comments like that. So we got, I thought it was a very constructive meeting with UDC. I think we got some very good feedback, and it was a good dialogue, good conversation.
Alder, Ms. Berger. Just promoted you.
So I wanted to, something that just hadn't quite come up. I appreciate the discussion with Commissioner Rory about the glass panel, and I think that I would also be, want to see that there if this goes forward. Can I ask about the roof mechanicals that are there today and the roof mechanicals that will be there in this? I see kind of where they would come out, I think, with the screening on the backside, and I'm just wondering, we talk about noise from games and things, which is a few days a year, but mechanical noise is all year
Absolutely.
round.
Yeah, so currently there are little to no mechanicals on the roof. There's just satellites for the TV usage, which we would then put inside there, raised a little bit. But we're putting a sheeting, and unfortunately, I'm not an architect, so I can't speak to the transparency and,
penthouse.
yeah. So it's all buried behind there, which will stop both seeing it and the noise
So
coming off of it.
it almost just looked like meshy as opposed to anything solid. Is that just a?
Yeah, I
am
think that's
not
to get
seeing
air
that?
to go through, because, you have the different AC units, things like that need air.
But then won't sound also come through?
That's a tough one for me to answer. But we would want to limit the amount of sound that comes out of those, off of that mechanical area into the neighborhood. I mean, we don't want to send that noise into the neighborhood, so.
I think the direction we've gotten is pretty consistent, that this entire face, all of this, needs to, as it faces south, try and be as soundproof as possible.
Absolutely.
And so that's a reflection of how these balconies might be handled. It's the reason why all of these windows are not openable. It's the reason why this particular terrace is not accessible as a deck. It's why a penthouse wall has been built around the mechanical systems. And it's why Commissioner Way is talking about a glass panel up there, all within the same genre of response to try and just completely block sound.
Okay.
You done?
Yes.
Okay, anyone else before I close the public hearing? Alder Eskridge, do you want to get in at this point, or would you rather do it later? What? You wait for discussion, okay. I will close the public hearing then, thank you. Questions for staff? No questions. Mr. Cantrell?
Can you, this building is proposed for 7 stories, and I know, hello, and I know that you said
Roy.
what are the consequences? And You you're saying your report that the Monroe Street Commercial District Plan allows 4 stories. But consideration of buildings taller than 4 stories maximum can be considered. Does the TSS district allow, as a conditional use, 2 additional stories or 3 additional stories, or is it unlimited number of stories?
By conditional use, it's unlimited.
It's unlimited in the
So
TSS?
the TSS district, if you can find that in particular standard number 12 that deals with height in excess of that allowed in the district, in this case TSS, can be met, you can approve a building of any height above 3 stories and 40 feet.
Are you done, Mr. Cantrell?
Yes,
at this
thank
point?
you.
Ms. Berger?
Mr. Parks or whomever, can you talk a little bit about the screening that is on the mechanicals there and whether or not, I know the architect wasn't here and I'm certainly not an expert in this stuff, but does this look like they've got laid out the most robust possible kinds of screening, or have you seen more solid types of screening that could do a better job? What's your opinion on the screening on this mechanical section?
I think that the Plan Commission has latitude to recommend more robust screening if they feel it's necessary. I think what the applicant has attempted to do there is balance the architecture at the top of the building with the need to screen the mechanical. That's not to say that what they're presenting is the only solution. And so if the Plan Commission is concerned that, for example, in order to find the standards met to approve the addition, that it wants solid screening, no mechanical venting towards the alley, towards the neighborhood to the southeast, it certainly could do that. It may generate changes to the rest of the plan for the 7th floor in terms of a lot of those are on that sort of southeasterly facade, and they may have to give up some programming space elsewhere because usually those sorts of things have to be vented in some form or fashion. And if they're being vented to the southeast and the Plan Commission doesn't feel that that's appropriate, then they may have to change the program to vent them otherwise.
Alder Zellers?
Yeah, I just want to confirm something in the report and then the conditions. So on page 7 of the report, it says, among the conditions proposed, staff is recommending, and then it says, including limits on the hours of operation and amplified sound. But then, as a condition, it says, amplified sound is prohibited at all times in all outdoor areas of the hotel. So what does it mean on page 7 where it says limits on amplified sound? Is that what that's referring to? Is the prohibition entirely?
Yes, I would go with the draft condition.
Okay. Okay, so prohibition entirely of amplified sound outdoors. Thank you.
Anyone else? Then a motion would be in order, Mr. Cantrell.
Thanks. I recommend that we place this on file because I believe that it doesn't comply with conditions number 9 and 12 of the zoning ordinance. And if I get a second, I'll have some additional comments.
Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Zellers. Mr. Cantrell?
I think this is at least the second time I've seen this project. And the last time we saw it, it was 8 stories. And I do feel, and I agree with one of the speakers, that the current building looks like it's been chopped off. 4 stories, I think,
it looks a little awkward. I do believe some additional height at this intersection is warranted because I think this is a unique location, as another speaker indicated. And this intersection, I believe, does warrant additional height. But when we reviewed the 8-story addition, I think that some commission members were feeling that potentially 2 additional floors might be appropriate. And I still believe that that is probably the best designed solution at this intersection. Again, I understand that the Monroe Street plan suggests that this area should remain 4 stories, but I believe that this intersection at Regent and Monroe, across the street from the stadium, is unique and provides some step down from those buildings. But in saying that, I do not feel that this design is in compliance with condition 9 and 12, and does not, the massing of it is out of character. Without prejudice, I'm sorry.
Without prejudice.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Cantrell. Mr. Rui.
I'm going to vote against the motion. Last time I was in favor of placing on file without prejudice, and I did make the comment about 2 stories, but what I've seen tonight with 3 additional stories looks really good. I think it fits the corner perfectly. It's still lower than the field house. It still has fewer stories than the Regent, which was built in the 60s. There's a lot of things across the street that's already going to be shorter than as a 7-story building. And I like architecturally how it looks in spite of comments I heard. I know it can be improved. I'll leave that to UDC to work on the detail. But I think this is a great effort to make everything work, and I want to approve it. So that's why I'm going to vote against place on file without prejudice.
Alder Eskridge.
Thank you. I also recommend that you vote against the motion that's been proposed. You've heard a lot of dialogue, and I've heard a lot of dialogue in the neighborhood about this proposal. And I think when you first hear about more height on this building without looking at it and considering all of the design iterations that we've seen, you might react and say immediately, no, we don't want more height at that corner. We don't want more height on Monroe Street. 7 stories is too tall for Monroe Street. I think that's kind of a natural gut instinct. And that was my gut instinct when Jason first told me about this project. Was like, come on, no. But I have to say that throughout this process, I think we've gotten to a design that is much better and does fit the intersection, and further has the opportunity to enhance the neighborhood as a whole. And so I think that because there's such, different views in the neighborhood from neighbors both near and further away from the project, you're going to hear from both sides. So you really have to consider the design aesthetics, the plan, and the plan is something that gave me a lot of trepidation in encouraging you to support the proposal before you. Frankly, I spoke to that last time in my comments, and I spoke to it again because I don't feel that we should regularly make decisions where we are going against our adopted plans. But I think that this is a unique enough situation and a unique enough site where it is appropriate and it does actually feel better on the site when you look at this building. Additionally, I think, just in my own personal opinion, the 7th floor space seems to also make a lot of sense. It adds a lot of value to the hotel. It adds a lot of value to the neighborhood. I think it's going to be a great space and continue to help Hotel Red to thrive over time, which is something that I do really believe benefits our neighborhood as a whole because it helps support all of those other things in our neighborhood that we all love so much and get to take advantage of because there are so many patrons and people visiting and people who live in the neighborhood who help us to support it. In the Monroe Street reconstruction process, we had the City Economic Development Division do a study of whether the residents around Monroe Street alone could support the commercial district that we have on Monroe Street. And it was clear that we cannot, that we need the influx of outside money to support the businesses that are currently on Monroe Street. And so in order for us to keep doing that, I really believe it's important to support uses like Hotel Red that weren't originally envisioned but are contributing so much to our neighborhood. So I hope you will support the plan that Hotel Red has put forward. I do believe it's a great compromise. I hope that you will add conditions to include more screening on the back and send it back to UDC for final approval so that they can continue to work on the design details. But I do believe that with the conditions that staff proposed and those additional conditions, this is a project that I think you can support, and I hope you will.
Thank you, Alder Eskridge. Alder King.
I very rarely agree with almost every single word that Commissioner Rui said. And I don't think he even said the word bike one time. I do think that there are some warranted concerns with the height and all that, but I really am swayed by the fact that this is a really special intersection where this building is. I think Hotel Red has surpassed every expectation from before its groundbreaking in terms of its contribution to the neighborhood. And I think that it's important to heed what Alder Eskridge said about the inability of the Monroe Street commercial corridor to support itself just on the residents adjacent to the neighborhood by themselves. I'm convinced of that every time one of my friends coordinates a happy hour down there and I am forced to go to one of the establishments that were mentioned by one of the speakers, including Hotel Red. And I have been the beneficiary of being hosted by Hotel Red for public meetings for the Greenbush Violence Revitalization Project. And I'm also really, really swayed by one other comment that hasn't come up, which Mr. Fish mentioned towards the beginning of his testimony, which is that the increase in the parking will remain even with the reduced amount of rooms and infrastructure under the new project. Because I think parking in this area is a real concern. And so I'm happy that in this reduced thing that's alleviated somewhat from the prior thing. So I think they've done everything to respond to this. I have every faith effort that UDC will beat them to hell, and as they usually do, and change it based on some of the feedback they've gotten. I will probably disagree with it, but I will let the process unfold. So I really urge my fellow commissioners to please vote against placing it on file.
Ms. Berger, I promoted you again. Ms. Berger next.
Watch out, Alder Eskridge. That's all right. I'll let you have it. So I do live in this district. I live 7 blocks away, and I see a lot of my neighbors' names on this petition, including my tenants in my building. And I share the concern of I would not want this to set a precedent for Monroe Street or even for Regent Street. I really don't think that it does. I really think, for all the reasons that everybody has said and that Mr. Fish said, this is a unique intersection, and I don't think that it will set a precedent. If it came in at 6 stories, it would have been a slam dunk for me. At 7, I've been a little bit more on the fence tonight. But I do think that I, too, am going to vote against the motion that's on the table right now to put it on file. I do think it's an aesthetic improvement. I think that it will add to the neighborhood in many ways. And yeah, so I'm going to vote against what's on the table. Thanks.
Alder Carter is next.
Yes, I will also be voting against putting it on file without prejudice. I think that this hotel, which I've been to several times for meetings and meeting friends, etc., brings a destination to the shops at Monroe Street for many of the guests there. It might become a frat house 8 times a year. I don't know, because I don't go there on football Saturdays. But every time I've gone there, there's been nothing but professionalism, and I've enjoyed talking to guests. More importantly, I think this will finally anchor that corner, and I think that we need to go forward with that. And I do agree with something that Alder King says, and I never agree with Alder King. But tonight you were right. Don't let it go to your head.
Alder Zellers.
Well, I do agree with Commissioner Cantrell. There is a project on this corner. I think that it could be improved by just a little bit less height, and I think that the developers could do that and come in with, as Commissioner Berger said, a slam dunk. So I will vote in favor of this motion. Thank you.
Anyone else? The alternates will not be voting. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The chair's in doubt. All those in favor, raise your hands, please. 1, 2, 3. Those opposed, raise your hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The motion fails. Is there another motion? Ms. Berger?
I would move approval of the project with, I think I'll get it with 2 additional conditions, one of which that they put glass screening on that 7th story or some sort of solid screening on that 7th-story balcony to be determined by the city. Hopefully that's good enough for you, on the alley side. And a second one, that they look at the screening of the mechanicals and step it up on the robustness of that screening to make sure that they're doing the best possible job that they can to screen the noise from the neighborhood.
Are you including the urban design
Oh, yes,
recommendations?
I'm sorry. And yes, along with the urban design conditions.
Is there a seconded by Mr. Rui? Did you want to address your motion, Ms. Berger?
I think I already have, no?
Okay. Then Alder King.
I would suggest that you articulate that we found that the standards have been met per the staff's recommendation, specifically standards 9 and 12.
I think you've just done it, assuming that that's
Okay.
part of the motion. Thank you. Alder Zellers?
Yes, I would like to add one condition. And this is how, in general, I would like it to read, and I'll look at staff to see if it is okay. And this is pretty much what I got from Mr. Parks. This site presents difficult constructability issues. Access to neighboring sites must be maintained at all times. Covered sidewalks will be constructed and maintained as soon as possible, and little to no access to the public right-of-way on Monroe Street or Regent Street will be granted for construction purposes. Provide a detailed construction plan to traffic engineering for review by the traffic control specialist prior to final sign-off. Thank you. I just want to make sure I got it all.
Is that acceptable to the body as a whole? Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay, so that's incorporated in.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion?
I do have a question or clarification on the third condition, the one regarding the UDC, and what the intent was of that.
I think it was just to take all these right here.
Okay, so it wasn't to go back to the commission, it was to incorporate the, okay.
But I think.
No, it doesn't. I misunderstood the comments, so it's.
But I think it probably should I think that should probably be incorporated in there. Should it probably be sent back to UDC as well to address these concerns?
Procedurally, I don't think that's.
No?
The conditional use standard 9, and we can talk about this, but conditional use standard 9 allows the plan commission to refer something back to UDC for an advisory recommendation. But in this case, we'd be putting them in a position potentially of granting approval, which I don't believe is allowed for this conditional use.
So this would be the work on these would be staff and the applicant?
Yeah, I mean, that would be my.
Okay, all right. So we understand that? No.
They don't have to go back to UDC.
No, this is the end. Anyone else before we vote? I just want to comment that Mark Twain said a long time ago that differences of opinion make a horse race. And the only thing I want to weigh in on is I really like architecture of our times, and I think that this is a good design. I just wanted to get that on the record, that I feel that way. I probably am not going to be voting on this, so it doesn't really matter, but I just wanted to state it. So, we have a motion, we have a second, we've had discussion. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. 1 no. The motion passes. Thank you all. I believe that concludes our work for this evening. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Alder King, seconded by Alder Carter. All those in favor say aye. Aye. I think I heard a majority. We're adjourned.